Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the hushed candlelit bedroom of a Victorian lady as she begins the most intimate and laborious ritual of her day, the slow, methodical removal of 8 complete layers of silk, linen, and whalebone that have encased her body since dawn. You stand before a full-length mirror in your dressing room, the gas lamps turned low, watching your lady's maid approach with practiced hands ready to begin the disassembly of your fashionable armour. Outside your window, London or perhaps Boston or Melbourne settles into evening, but your day cannot truly end until you've been extracted from the architectural marvel of fabric and engineering that is Victorian women's clothing. The story may solve mysteries you never had an explanation for, like why Victorian literature obsesses over swooning women, or why getting dressed required an entire servant just for the task. So, before you explore the story with me, please take a moment to help me subscribe to the channel, like and share this video, or maybe leave a comment below, but make sure you do it when you really like what I bring to you. Tell me where you're watching from tonight, or perhaps share your own most elaborate bedtime routine, though I doubt it involves 47 buttons and a steel cage strapped to your backside. Now, let's keep the lights as soft as possible, turn on the fan for a gentle sound to help the story feel more emotional, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. You've been wearing this particular ensemble for approximately 14 hours, since your maid laced you into it at 7:30 this morning. Your body has learned to move within its constraints, the restricted breathing, the rigid posture, the inability to bend at the waist or reach behind your back. But now, finally, the architecture can come down. Your maid, Mary, circles you slowly, her fingers already moving toward the first of many closures. She knows this dress intimately. She was the one who fastened every single hook and button this morning, and she's the only one who can efficiently reverse the process. The evening undressing ritual is as choreographed as a dance. You cannot simply tear off your clothing in a moment of exhaustion. Each layer must be removed in precise order, or the whole system jams. Imagine trying to remove a corset while still wearing 3 petticoats over it, or attempting to extract yourself from drawers while your stockings are still gartered high on your thighs. The Victorians, for all their reputation for spontaneity in other areas, engineered their clothing with the complexity of a puzzle box. Mary begins with your collar, a separate piece of starched linen that's been chafing your neck since mid-afternoon. It's held in place with a collar stud at the back, a small brass post that requires fingernails and patience to extract. You feel it pop free, and immediately your neck can move through its full range of motion for the first time since breakfast. This tiny liberation is exquisite. Historians still argue whether the Victorian obsession with high collars was purely about modesty or partly about maintaining the elongated neck that was considered the height of elegance. But right now you don't care about aesthetics, you just want it off. The outer dress is next. This particular gown is your evening dress for at home wear, not fancy enough for a ball, but too elaborate for morning activities. It's constructed from bronze silk taffeta that rustles with every movement, creating that distinctive Victorian sound that announced a woman's presence before she entered a room. The bodice alone contains 43 buttons running down the back, each one covered in matching silk and threaded through hand-stitched buttonholes. Mary works from top to bottom with remarkable speed, her fingers moving in a blur you can barely track in the mirror. You try to calculate how many times she's performed this exact task. If she's been your lady's maid for 3 years, and she dresses and undresses you every single day, that's over 2,000 repetitions of this button sequence. Her muscle memory is so ingrained that she could probably do it blindfolded, which is fortunate because the candlelight throws deceptive shadows across the fabric. As the bodice gapes open, you feel the evening air kept at exactly 62 degrees Fahrenheit by careful fire management touch the corset beneath. The dress bodice has been acting as an additional layer of compression, holding everything even more firmly in place. Without it, you can expand your ribcage perhaps another 1/4 inch. Not much, but enough to notice. The skirt of the dress attaches separately at the waist, held by hooks and eyes that Mary releases with practiced twists. The entire silk construction slides down over your hips and pulls at your feet, approximately 11 yards of fabric in the skirt alone, weighing roughly 4 pounds. You step out of the circle of bronze taffeta, and Mary immediately whisks it away to be hung, brushed, and examined for any spots or tears that need attention before you wear it again. Now you stand in what the Victorians would consider undressed, though you're still wearing at least 6 more layers. You can see your silhouette in the mirror, the rigid conical corset creating that fashionable wasp waist, the dome of petticoats ballooning out below, the mysterious protrusion at your lower back where the bustle creates its architectural shelf. You look like a belle, a very expensive, very uncomfortable belle. Mary brings you your dressing gown, a quilted silk wrapper that you'll wear between the removal of outer clothing and the application of nightwear. This is the uniform of the in-between state, the liminal space between public presentation and private rest. You slide your arms into its loose sleeves and feel the first whisper of unrestricted movement. Your shoulders can actually roll backward. Revolutionary. But there's still so much more to remove. You settle onto the low-padded stool before your dressing table, and Mary positions herself behind you, ready to begin the next phase. Through the window, you can hear a horse-drawn carriage clattering past on the cobblestones below. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimes 9. You've been home for 2 hours, but you've only just begun the process of truly arriving. The dressing room itself is a sanctuary of feminine privacy that would have been unthinkable a century earlier. In Georgian times, ladies dressed in their bedrooms with perhaps a small corner screened off. But Victorian architecture elevated the dressing room to its own dedicated space, usually positioned between the bedroom and the water closet, creating a buffer zone where the messy business of bodily maintenance could occur away from the sleeping chamber's romantic associations. Your dressing room contains a wardrobe that spans an entire wall, a full-length cheval mirror that can tilt to show your silhouette from any angle, the cushioned stool you're currently occupying, and a small table crowded with the tools of beauty maintenance hairbrushes, combs, button hooks, powder boxes, and mysterious little pots of cream whose ingredients you've never questioned too closely. A washstand holds a pitcher and basin for the preliminary washing that will happen before you move to the bedroom proper. Mary has laid out your nightclothes on a side chair, the white linen nightgown pressed and warmed by being placed near the fire, the embroidered nightcap that you privately think makes you look ridiculous, but which your mother insists is essential for maintaining proper hair health. There are your bedroom slippers, lined with lamb's wool, your dressing gown for morning, everything in its place, ready for the transformation from social creature to sleeping being. You catch your own eye in the mirror and barely recognize yourself, not because you look different, but because you look so constructed. Every element of your appearance has been manufactured, from the curls pinned so carefully at your temples to the subtle pink tint on your cheeks. Even your posture is artificial. You're sitting with a straight spine not because it's comfortable, but because the corset's bones literally prevent you from slouching. Historians still argue whether Victorian women internalised these postural requirements so deeply that they maintained them even when uncorseted, essentially becoming their own jailers, or whether the relief of undressing allowed for complete physical abandonment. You suspect the truth is somewhere in between. The process you're beginning is, in its way, an act of archaeology. Each layer removed reveals something about how Victorian society thought about women's bodies. Modesty, sexuality, and social class. A working-class woman might wear only 3 or 4 layers of chemise, drawers, a single petticoat, and a dress. But you, with your silk and your lady's maid and your heated dressing room, wear your wealth on your body, literally. Each additional layer is a statement: I am so rich I can afford to be impractical. I am so leisured I can spend an hour getting dressed. I am so important I require a servant dedicated entirely to maintaining my appearance. But right now, all you want is to be free of it. Your body is sending increasingly urgent signals of discomfort. Your feet ache in their narrow boots. Your ribs strain against the corset's embrace. Your scalp prickles under the weight of pins and false hair. The evening ahead contains at least 30 more minutes of meticulous dismantling before you can finally slide between the sheets and let your muscles fully relax. Mary has finished preparing and now turns her attention back to you, ready to begin the serious work of undressing. She meets your eyes in the mirror and gives you a small, knowing smile. She's been through this hundreds of times, and she knows exactly how exhausted you are. "Shall we begin with the boots, ma'am?" she asks quietly, her voice soft in the hushed room. You nod, grateful. The boots have been your nemesis since 3 o'clock this afternoon, and so the true undressing begins. Your feet have been imprisoned in kidskin leather since this morning, and they're staging a rebellion. Mary kneels before you with the button hook, a specialised tool about 6 inches long with a hook at one end, designed specifically for the task ahead. Your boots are ankle height, made of supple bronze-coloured leather dyed to match your dress, and they fasten with 22 tiny buttons running up the side of each boot. These aren't decorative buttons, they're functional closures that keep the leather moulded tightly to your foot and ankle, creating that sleek, narrow silhouette that fashion demands. She inserts the hook through the first buttonhole, catches the button, and pulls it through with a practiced flick of her wrist. Pop. 1 down. 43 to go. The process is meditative in its repetition, and you find your breathing slowing to match the rhythm of her work. Pop, pop, pop. Each released button allows the leather to gape open a fraction more, leaving infinitesimal amounts of pressure. By the time she's halfway up the first boot, you can already feel your foot beginning to spread to its natural width, or at least attempting to, because it's been compressed into an unnatural shape for so many hours that it's almost forgotten its original form. The Victorians were obsessed with small feet on women, seeing them as markers of gentility and refinement. A working woman who walked miles each day on hard surfaces had broad, practical feet. But a lady who only walked from carriage to parlour, always on carpet or polished wood, could maintain feet that were almost childlike in their delicacy. Your own feet, if you're honest with yourself, are probably permanently narrowed from years of this daily compression. Historians still argue whether foot binding in China and tight boot wearing in the West were truly comparable practices, or whether the Western version was mild enough to escape the same moral condemnation. You suspect future generations will judge you all harshly regardless. The first boot finally surrenders, and Mary eases it off your foot. The relief is so intense it's almost painful, that paradoxical sensation when blood flow returns to a compressed area. Your stockinged foot meets the air, still shaped like the boot's interior, and you flex your toes experimentally. They protest. Everything protests. Mary sets the boot aside carefully. These cost 3 guineas and must be maintained meticulously, and begins on the second boot. While she works, you take inventory of what you're still wearing. Over your skin, closest to your body, is the chemise, a loose linen shift that falls to mid-thigh. Over that, your drawers, which are actually 2 separate legs attached to a waistband. meeting but not sewn together at the crotch, over the drawers, your corset, that masterpiece of engineering that's been moulding your torso into an hourglass for the past 14 hours. Over the corset, a corset cover, which is essentially a decorative chemise that prevents the corset's hardware from damaging your outer clothing. Then comes the first petticoat, then the bustle, then 2 more petticoats, and finally the dress that's already been removed. Actually, you've been miscounting. That's 9 layers, not 8. The Victorians were even more excessive than you remembered. The second boot comes off, and now both feet are free. You wiggle your toes and feel the stockings shift slightly. These are silk stockings, held up by garters just above your knees, and they've been creating their own zones of compression all day. But they'll have to wait their turn in the undressing sequence. You can't access the garters while you're still wearing multiple petticoats. There's simply too much fabric in the way. Mary stands and moves behind you again, reaching for the ties of your dressing gown. Wait, you haven't even mentioned that you put the dressing gown on yet. Let me back up. The dressing gown is actually donned after the outer dress is removed, so you're wearing it now over all your undergarments. It's a modesty measure, ensuring that even in the privacy of your dressing room, you're never standing in just your underclothes. The Victorians had anxiety about propriety that extended even into spaces where no one but your maid could see you. Mary unties the dressing gown and slips it from your shoulders, hanging it on a nearby hook. Now you're standing in the full glory of Victorian foundation garments, and the real work begins. She circles you, assessing the situation like a general surveying a battlefield. The next layer to remove is the outermost petticoat, the dust ruffle, as it's sometimes called, though you've always hated that term. It's designed to protect the inner petticoats from dirt and wear, constructed from sturdy cotton with a deep flounce at the hem. This petticoat ties at the waist with simple fabric tapes, and Mary makes quick work of the bow. The entire structure slides down your hips and drops to the floor in a perfect circle around your feet. You step out of it, and immediately you feel lighter. This particular petticoat weighs about 2 pounds, not crushing, but noticeable when added to everything else. It's like wearing a small bag of flour around your waist all day. Beneath it, the second petticoat is revealed. This one is more elaborate, made from white cotton but heavily starched to give it body and structure. The starch makes the fabric stand away from your legs, creating that fashionable bell shape that your dress drapes over. Without adequate petticoat support, the dress would simply collapse against your body, revealing the actual shape of your legs, a scandal beyond contemplation. The Victorians were terrified of female legs. Trouser wearing was still considered shocking for women, and even glimpses of ankles were carefully controlled. This second petticoat also ties at the waist, but the knot has tightened over the course of the day, and Mary has to work at it with her fingernails. You remember reading about a case where a woman's petticoat tapes knotted so tightly they had to be cut off, ruining the garment. Fashion was, quite literally, binding. After a minute of patient tugging, the knot releases, and petticoat number 2 joins its companion on the floor. Now things get interesting, because you've reached the bustle layer. The bustle is strapped directly to your body, over the corset but under the remaining petticoats. To remove it, Mary has to access the buckles that hold it in place, which means lifting the remaining underskirts. She gathers the fabric and holds it up while you reach behind yourself or try to, because the corset restricts your arm movement, to unbuckle the contraption. The bustle is a relatively recent invention in Victorian fashion, having come into prominence in the 1870s and evolving through various forms over the decades. The one you're wearing tonight is a moderate version from the mid-1880s, not the extreme shelf-like structures of a few years earlier, but still substantial. It's constructed from a series of graduated steel hoops covered in fabric, designed to project your skirts backward in a graceful curve while keeping them flat in front. The effect is to make your waist look even smaller by exaggerating the proportions of your lower body. But the bustle also has a more practical, if rarely discussed, function. It provides a counterweight to the heavy fabric of your skirts, preventing them from pulling backward and exposing your ankles when you walk. It's structural engineering masquerading as decoration. The buckles finally release. There are two, one on each side of your waist, and Mary pulls the bustle apparatus away from your body. You feel your lower back decompress immediately. The bustle has been pressing against your spine all day, forcing you to maintain an artificial forward tilt to your pelvis. Without it, you can stand naturally for the first time since morning. You roll your shoulders, arch your back experimentally, and feel vertebrae shift with soft pops. "Better, ma'am?" Mary asks with a hint of amusement. She knows the answer. "Immeasurably," you reply, and you both share a moment of understanding. She wears a corset too, though a simpler version, and while servants don't typically wear bustles, she understands the relief of removing structural undergarments. One more petticoat remains the innermost one, made from fine white linen with a deep flounce of broderie anglaise at the hem. This is the petticoat that actually touches your legs when you move. So it's constructed from softer, more comfortable fabric. It's also the most expensive of the three, because it's the one most likely to be glimpsed if you lift your skirts to climb stairs or step over a puddle. God forbid someone see a plain utilitarian petticoat. Even your undergarments must maintain appearances. The final petticoat whispers against your legs as Mary unties the tapes at your waist. This one has been your intimate companion all day. The layer closest to your actual body, well, closest aside from the chemise and drawers beneath it. As it falls away, you're suddenly aware of how much lighter you feel, how much easier it is to move. You've shed approximately 8 pounds of fabric in the last 10 minutes, and your body is recalibrating to this new freedom. You stand now in what the Victorians would consider genuine undress, the kind of state that only your husband and your maid are permitted to witness. The chemise, drawers, corset, and corset cover remain, along with your stockings and garters, but the architectural superstructure has been dismantled. Without the petticoats, you can see the actual shape of your legs beneath the thin linen of your drawers. It's oddly disorienting, like seeing your own skeleton through your skin. Mary gathers the 3 petticoats and drapes them over a standing rack designed specifically for airing undergarments. They'll hang here overnight, allowing any moisture from your body to evaporate before they're brushed, inspected for stains, and folded away until tomorrow. Petticoats require laundering only once a week unless their visibly soiled daily washing would wear out the fabric too quickly. And the starching process is labour-intensive enough that you don't want to repeat it more often than necessary. The starch itself is a whole production. Mary spends part of every Monday in the laundry room with the washerwoman, mixing potato starch or wheat starch with boiling water to create the exact consistency needed for proper petticoat stiffness. Too much starch and the fabric becomes brittle and uncomfortable. Too little and it won't hold the required shape. The starch petticoats are then ironed while still slightly damp, using heavy flat irons heated on the stove, pressed with enough force to seal the starch into the fibres. It's exhausting work, and you're suddenly grateful that you're not the one doing it, but back to your own body, which is still protesting its prolonged confinement. You can feel the imprints of various waistbands across your midsection. Each petticoat tie has left its own red line, creating a topographical map of compression zones. In the mirror, if you were to lift your chemise, you'd see these marks, clearly parallel lines circling your waist like tree rings, documenting the layers you've been carrying. historians still argue whether the Victorian practice of wearing multiple waistbands created chronic circulation problems for women, or whether the body adapted to the daily compression without lasting damage. You suspect you'll know the answer in about 30 years when you're old enough to assess the cumulative effects. Mary notices you rubbing your waist and makes a sympathetic sound. "Shall I fetch the arnica cream?" "Ma'am, for the marks." "You consider it. Arnica's supposed to help with bruising and soreness, though you are never entirely sure if it actually works, or if the act of massage itself provides the relief. Victorian medicine is full of remedies that seem to operate more on hope than pharmacology. But then again, modern doctors are still prescribing cocaine for toothaches and arsenic for complexion improvement, so perhaps you shouldn't judge the arnica too harshly. "Not tonight," you tell her. "I just want to finish undressing and get into bed." She nods and returns her attention to the remaining layers. The corset cover is next. This is a sleeveless garment that slips over your head, made from fine white cotton with a bit of lace trim at the neckline. Its sole purpose is to protect your outer clothing from the metal hardware and whalebone of your corset, and to absorb any perspiration before it can reach your expensive dress fabrics. It also provides a modest layer over the corset itself, because even though the corset is a foundational garment, it's still considered underwear, and underwear should never be directly visible. Mary gathers the hem of the corset cover and lifts it up over your head in one smooth motion. Your arms automatically rise to help, and for a moment you're trapped in fabric before your head emerges from the neck hole. The evening air, still maintained at that precise 62 degrees, touches your bare shoulder and upper arms for the first time since morning. The chemise beneath has small cap sleeves, leaving most of your arms exposed, and you can see goosebumps rising on your skin despite the carefully regulated temperature. Now comes the main event, the corset itself. This is the foundation upon which everything else has been built. The structural core that has been shaping your torso into an idealized form since you were 14 years old. Your particular corset is made from white, a tightly woven cotton twill that's strong enough to withstand significant stress, reinforced with 24 whalebone stays arranged vertically around your torso. The stays are actually baleen from the mouths of whales, flexible yet firm, sewn into channels that run from just below your breasts to just above your hips. The corset closes in front with a rigid busk, a flat strip of steel with posts on one side and eyes on the other, which slot together with satisfying clicks when you're getting dressed. But the real cinching happens in back, where two long laces thread through metal grommets in a complex crisscross pattern. When you dressed this morning, Mary pulled those laces with considerable force, bringing the two back panels of the corset closer and closer together until your waist was reduced from its natural 26 inches to a fashionable 21 inches. 5 inches of compression, maintained for 14 hours, held in place by tightly knotted laces. Mary's fingers find the knot at the bottom of the lacing, where the ends are tied off. Victorian ladies' maids develop specialised skills in knot management. The knot must be tight enough to hold all day through sitting, standing, bending and eating, but not so tight that it can't be undone at night. This particular knot is Mary's signature, a double loop with the ends tucked through in a way that looks impossibly complex but releases with a single firm tug. She pulls, and the knot surrenders. The laces are still threaded through all the grommets, still holding the corset closed, but now there's potential for expansion. Mary begins the unlacing process, working from bottom to top, pulling the laces through each set of grommets with a rhythmic motion that creates a soft shh sound. With each pull, you feel the corset loosening by degrees, not enough to make a dramatic difference yet, but enough to let you know that freedom is approaching. The unlacing takes several minutes because there are 16 pairs of grommets, and Mary has to work the laces through each one individually. You've tried to do this yourself on occasions when Mary was ill or busy, and you've discovered that it's nearly impossible to reach all the grommets comfortably. The Victorian lady is physically dependent on her servant for the most basic acts of dressing and undressing. You literally cannot get yourself out of your own clothing without assistance. The thought would be humiliating if you weren't so accustomed to it. As Mary works, you think about the corset debates that rage in newspapers and medical journals. Some doctors claim that tight lacing causes liver damage, displaced organs, and reproductive problems. Other doctors insist that moderate corseting is harmless and even beneficial for posture support. Fashion magazines publish illustrations of women with impossibly tiny waists 16 inches, 18 inches, and claim these measurements are achievable through dedicated lacing. Reform-minded women argue for rational dress and the abandonment of corsets entirely, while traditionalists insist that an uncorseted woman is practically naked and certainly immoral. You've worn a corset every day since puberty, and you honestly don't know what the truth is. Your waist is certainly smaller than it would be naturally. And yes, sometimes you feel lightheaded. And yes, eating a large meal is uncomfortable. And yes, you've definitely experienced the breathlessness that comes from laughing too hard while tightly laced. But you've never fainted, never experienced the dramatic health crises that anti-corset crusaders describe. Then again, how would you know if your organs were slowly being damaged? They're not exactly visible. The laces finally reach the top grommets, and Mary pulls them completely free. The corset is now held closed only by the front busk, and you can already feel your ribcage beginning to expand. Your breathing deepens automatically, filling spaces that have been unavailable all day. It's like taking the first real breath after being underwater. Not that you were suffocating before, but you weren't exactly breathing freely either. Mary comes around to face you and reaches for the front busk. This is always a slightly awkward moment because the busk runs right up the centre of your body, and releasing it requires Mary's hands to be very close to your breasts. You've been through this thousands of times, so neither of you feels embarrassed. But there's still a peculiar intimacy to it, a reminder that your body is not entirely your own, that your privacy is always mediated through your servant's labour. Mary's fingers work the bust fastenings from top to bottom. There are 11 individual posts that must be released from their corresponding eyes. Each one makes a small metallic pop as it separates, and with each pop you feel the corset's grip loosening incrementally. The steel busk has been pressed against your sternum all day, creating a rigid line down the centre of your body that prevented you from bending forward or twisting at the waist. Victorian posture is largely a product of this inflexible strip of metal running up your front. The final post releases, and the corset springs open with an almost audible sigh of relief, though whether that sigh comes from you or from the tortured fabric finally released from tension, you can't quite say. Mary grasps both sides of the corset and gently pulls it away from your body. The whalebone stays have been curved to your shape for so long that they maintain their bent form even when removed, creating a ghostly impression of your torso floating in Mary's hands. The relief is extraordinary. Your ribcage expands fully for the first time in 14 hours, and you take a deep, shuddering breath that fills your lungs to capacity. The sensation is almost dizzying oxygen flooding your system, your diaphragm dropping into the space it's been denied all day. You can feel your internal organs shifting, settling back into their natural positions after being compressed into the upper portion of your torso. Your stomach drops lower. Your liver, which has been pushed up against your ribs, finds its proper home. Everything rearranges itself with a peculiar internal sensation that's not quite pain but definitely noticeable. You look down at your body and see the evidence of the corset's work. The chemise clings damply to your skin. You've been perspiring into the linen all day. and now that the corset is gone, you can feel how wet the fabric actually is. Through the thin material, you can see the red marks left by the whalebone stay's vertical lines running up and down your torso like prison bars. Some darker than others where the pressure was greatest. The line where the top of the corset cut across your ribs is particularly vivid. A deep red groove that will take hours to fade completely. Mary carries the corset to the drying rack with almost reverent care. This particular corset cost 12 guineas more than Mary earns in 6 months, and it must be treated accordingly. She drapes it over a specially shaped form that will help it maintain its structure overnight. Corsets that are simply hung on hooks or folded lose their shape and have to be replaced more frequently. The whalebone stays need to air out and dry, otherwise they become brittle and can snap, which is both expensive and potentially dangerous. A broken stay can poke through the fabric and stab you in the ribs without warning. You stand now in just your chemise, drawers, and stockings, the final 3 layers. Your body is its own shape again, or at least closer to it. Without the corset, your waist expands to its natural dimensions, and you can see the actual curve of your stomach, which the corset had flattened and controlled. The Victorians have complex feelings about women's stomachs. They must be kept flat and unnoticeable beneath clothing, suggesting a kind of ethereal, non-eating existence. But everyone knows that women have digestive systems, and that those systems require space to function. You run your hands down your sides, feeling the softness that the corset had compressed. There's definitely more flesh here than the corset allowed to show. You're not sure if this is comforting or disturbing to discover that your fashionable silhouette is such an artificial construction, so different from your actual body. Historians still argue whether the Victorian separation between corseted self and natural self created a kind of psychological split in women's body image. A disconnect between how they looked clothed and how they looked naked. You suspect it did because you're experiencing that disconnect right now, staring at your uncorseted waist and barely recognizing it as your own. Mary returns with a damp cloth and begins gently wiping the sweat from your torso through the chemise. This is part of the evening ritual, not a full bath, which would be a major production requiring heated water to be carried up from the kitchen, but a quick freshening that removes the day's perspiration and makes you feel cleaner. The cloth is warm and soothing, and you close your eyes as she works, dabbing at your neck, your shoulders, your back. The chemise itself will come off soon, but not quite yet. First, the stockings must be dealt with. You sit back down on the padded stool, and Mary kneels before you once again. Your stockings are silk fine, expensive silk in a pale ivory colour that disappears against your skin tone. They're held up by garters just above each knee, elasticized bands of ribbon decorated with small rosettes. The garters are tight enough to hold the stockings securely, but not so tight that they cut off circulation at least. That's the theory. In practice, they've been creating pressure points all day, and you know that when they come off, you'll see the telltale red rings they've left behind. Mary reaches up under the hem of your chemise to access the first garter. There's something oddly vulnerable about this sitting here while someone else removes your stockings, like being a child again. But then, so much of being a Victorian lady is like being a child dependent on others for basic physical tasks, dressed and undressed by servants, your days structured by rules you didn't create and can't change. The first garter releases with a snap of elastic, and immediately you feel the stocking begin to slide down your calf. Mary rolls it down carefully. These stockings are too delicate and expensive to simply yank off. She works the silk over your heel, over your arch, off your toes, and suddenly one leg is bare from knee to foot, covered only by the thin cotton of your open-legged drawers. The evening air touches your naked calf and goosebumps rise instantly. The red ring left by the garter is clearly visible just above your knee, a perfect circle of compressed flesh. that stands out against your paler skin. Mary makes a soft tisking sound and reaches for a small pot of salve from the dressing table. Without asking, she dips her fingers into the ointment and begins massaging it into the mark with gentle circular motions. The salve smells of lavender and something else you can't quite identify, camphor, perhaps, or eucalyptus. It's cool against your skin, soothing the irritation. While she works, you examine the stocking she's just removed in the candlelight. You can see the delicate construction, the fine knit, the reinforced heel and toe, the tiny seam running up the back. These stockings are marvels of manufacturing, theirs, produced on specialised machinery that's only been perfected in the last few decades. Before that, stockings were knitted by hand and cost even more than they do now. You own 12 pairs of silk stockings, which sounds excessive until you consider that they must be washed after every wearing and that they develop runs and holes that require darning. You probably go through 20 pairs a year, replacing the ones that wear out beyond repair. The second garter releases, and Mary repeats the process, rolling the stocking down, removing it carefully, massaging salve into the red mark it's left behind. Now both your legs are bare, bare beneath your drawers, and you flex your feet, pointing and flexing your toes, feeling the full range of movement that's been restricted by tight boots and compressed stockings all day. Your feet look pale and slightly wrinkled, like they have been underwater too long. In a sense, they have been submerged in leather and silk, cut off from air and light. Mary places both stockings in a small basket designated for items that need laundering. They'll be washed by hand tomorrow in cool water with gentle soap, then rolled in towels to remove excess moisture before being stretched on wooden sock forms to dry. It's tedious work, but necessary. Silk is delicate and responds poorly to rough treatment. You stand up from the stool, and your bare feet make contact with the carpet for the first time tonight. The pile is soft and thick, imported from Turkey at considerable expense, and your toes sink into it slightly. After a full day in rigid boots, the sensation is almost overwhelming. You take a few experimental steps, feeling your arches spread naturally, your weight distributing evenly across your soles. This is how feet are meant to work, without the interference of heeled boots and tight lacing. But you can't spend the evening walking around barefoot. That would be unseemly, even in private. Mary produces your bedroom slippers from where she's had them waiting by the fire to warm. They're made of soft kid skin lined with lamb's wool, more like moccasins than shoes, with thin soles that allow you to feel the floor beneath your feet. You slide them on, and they envelop your feet in gentle warmth. These slippers will be what you wear for the remainder of the evening, first through the rest of the undressing process, then through your bedtime ablutions, and finally during the brief walk from dressing room to bedroom. Now comes the removal of the most intimate layers, the garments that touch your skin directly and absorb all the evidence of your body's daily functions. You're standing in just your chemise and drawers, and Mary approaches with the practical efficiency of someone who has performed this task countless times. There's no embarrassment between you anymore. She's seen your body in every state, knows its rhythms and peculiarities better than perhaps anyone except your husband, and even he doesn't see you in quite this clinical way. The chemise is the easier of the two remaining garments. It's essentially a long, loose shirt made from fine white linen, falling to mid-thigh with short sleeves and a gathered neckline. The neckline fastens with a single button at your throat and a drawstring ribbon that's been tied in a simple bow all day. Mary reaches up and unties the ribbon first, loosening the neckline so it gapes open slightly. Then she unfastens the button, and the chemise falls open at your throat. "Arms up, ma'am," she says quietly, and you obey automatically, raising your arms over your head like a child being undressed for bed. Mary gathers the hem of the chemise and lifts it up your body in one smooth motion. For a moment you're engulfed in damp linen that smells of your own sweat and the lavender sachets that were tucked into your drawer this morning. Then your head emerges from the neckline. Your arms slip free of the sleeves, and suddenly you're standing topless in your dressing room, bare from the waist up except for the gentle covering of your own skin. The air feels shockingly cold against your breasts and stomach, though the temperature hasn't changed. It's just that you've been covered for so many hours that exposure feels extreme. You can see your nipples tightening in response to the temperature change, your skin erupting in goosebumps that run down your arms and across your chest. Mary doesn't pause or stare, she simply moves to the washstand, wets a fresh cloth in the basin, and returns to begin washing your upper body more thoroughly now that the chemise is gone. The warm cloth moves across your shoulders, down your arms, under each armpit where you've been perspiring most heavily. Mary's touch is brisk and professional, scrubbing away the day's accumulation of sweat and dead skin. She washes your breasts matter-of-factly, lifting each one slightly to clean beneath, then moves down to your stomach and ribs, erasing the red marks left by the corset with gentle pressure. The washing is not exactly pleasant. The rough cloth is slightly abrasive, and the soap stings a bit where your skin is most irritated, but it's necessary. And when it's finished, you do feel cleaner. Mary wraps you in a towel temporarily while she prepares the next phase, and you stand there hugging the warm fabric to your chest, watching her move efficiently around the room. She's younger than you by 5 years, which makes her 23, and she's been in service since she was 12. Sometimes you wonder what she thinks about while she's washing your body, buttoning your boots, arranging your hair. Does she resent the intimacy forced upon her by employment? Does she find your body disgusting, fascinating, or simply unremarkable after so many repetitions you've never asked? And she's never volunteered the information. The relationship between lady and lady's maid exists in a strange space where physical intimacy coexists with emotional distance. She returns with your nightgown, and you drop the towel. The nightgown is made from white linen so fine it's almost translucent, with long sleeves, a high neck, and a hem that will fall to your ankles. It's decorated with tucks and pin tucks across the bodice and delicate whitework embroidery round the collar and cuffs, hours of someone's needlework, probably done by an anonymous seamstress working in the dim factory for pennies per day. The nightgown slips over your head easily, billowing around your body with a whisper of fabric. After the constriction of your day wear, the looseness is almost disorienting. The gown doesn't touch your waist, doesn't compress your ribs, doesn't shape you into anything other than what you are. It simply falls in straight lines from your shoulders to your feet, and beneath it your body can be whatever shape it likes. But you're not finished undressing yet. The drawers are still on, and they need to come off before you can put on your nighttime drawers. Yes, you wear different drawers for sleeping, because the daytime ones are constructed differently and aren't comfortable for bed. Victorian ladies have specialised clothing for every activity, including sleeping. Mary kneels before you once more and reaches up under your nightgown to access the waistband of your drawers. This is where the design of Victorian undergarments becomes particularly strange to the uninitiated. Your drawers consist of 2 separate legs, each with its own waistband, both tied to a central waistband that goes around your middle. The 2 legs meet at the crotch but are not sewn together. There's a gap of several inches that remains open. This open crotch design seems bizarre until you consider the practicalities with all these layers of clothing. Using the chamber pot would be nearly impossible if your drawers were closed. The open design allows you to simply sit down and do your business without having to remove multiple layers of undergarments. The waistband ties at the front with fabric tapes, and Mary unties them now, loosening the drawers so they drop down your legs beneath the nightgown. You step out of them, and she pulls them free from under the hem of your nightgown. For a few seconds, you're completely naked beneath a thin linen gown, no undergarments at all. Just skin and nightdress. The sensation is both liberating and slightly scandalous, even though you're covered from neck to ankle. The daytime drawers join the chemise in the laundry basket. Both garments are damp with sweat, bearing the evidence of your body's 14-hour confinement. They'll be boiled tomorrow with soap and washing soda, scrubbed on a washboard, rinsed multiple times, wrung out by hand and hung in the drying room or outside if weather permits. Laundering is one of the most labour-intensive aspects of maintaining a Victorian wardrobe, requiring hours of work and specialised equipment. Historians still argue whether the Victorian obsession with white undergarments, which showed dirt easily and required frequent, intensive washing, was a deliberate display of wealth, proving you could afford the labour costs of maintaining impractical clothing. Mary produces your nighttime drawers from a drawer where they have been warming by the fire. These are simpler than the daytime version, made from soft cotton flannel rather than linen, with just one waistband instead of the complex double-leg construction. They are also closed at the crotch since you won't be getting dressed or using the chamber pot until morning. There's no need for the open design. Mary holds them open, and you step into them 1 foot at a time, then pull them up under your nightgown. She helps you tie the waistband securely. Now you're dressed for bed. Or almost. The nightgown and drawers are on. Your feet are in their warm slippers, but there are still several more steps before you can actually slide between the sheets. The bed itself isn't even ready yet. Mary will need to prepare it, and you have your evening ablutions to complete. But the undressing proper is finished. All 8 layers, or 9, depending on how you count, have been removed, folded, hung, or consigned to the laundry. Your body has been liberated from its daytime architecture. You catch sight of yourself in the mirror and barely recognise the woman staring back. Without the corset, your waist is soft and natural. Without the dress and petticoats, your hips are just hips, not a decorated shelf. Without the boots and tight stockings, you're standing naturally instead of perched on heels. This is your actual body, the one that exists beneath all the construction. It's rounder, softer, more human than the fashionable figure you present to the world. Mary appears at your elbow with your dressing gown a different one than before. This time a thick, quilted robe designed for warmth rather than modesty. Since you're already covered by your nightgown, you slip your arms into the sleeves and tie it closed at the waist. The fabric is heavy and comforting, like being wrapped in a blanket. The undressing of your body is complete, but the undressing of your head is just beginning. You move to the dressing table and sit down on the cushioned bench, facing the mirror with its array of silver-backed brushes, tortoiseshell combs, and mysterious little pots arranged like an alchemist's laboratory. Mary positions herself behind you, and her fingers begin their careful exploration of your hair, searching for the first of what must be 40 or 50 pins holding your elaborate coiffure in place. Your hair has been arranged since 8 o'clock this morning in the fashionable style of the season, swept up and back, twisted into an intricate knot at the crown, with 2 carefully sculpted waves at your temples and a few artful tendrils allowed to escape near your ears. The construction required not only your own hair, but several added pieces, switches of human hair purchased from women desperate enough to sell their crowning glory, processed and mounted on combs, dyed to match your natural colour exactly. Victorian hairstyles are architectural projects requiring foundations, support structures, and finishing details. Much like the buildings going up all over the city's expanding neighbourhoods, Mary finds the first hairpin and slides it out carefully. It's a simple wire pin, bent into a U-shape, about 3 inches long. She places it in a small china dish on the dressing table, where it makes a tiny clinking sound. Then she finds the second pin, and the third, and the fourth. Each one slides out with a small tug that you feel against your scalp, not painful exactly, but noticeable. A tiny release of tension. The pins have been holding your hair in place so firmly that your scalp has gone slightly numb in patches, and as each pin comes out, the blood flow returns with a pins and needles sensation. The process is meditative. Clink, clink, clink. The pins accumulate in the dish like a strange metal harvest. Mary works systematically, starting at the back and moving forward, removing the pins in the reverse order that she inserted them this morning. She knows the architecture intimately because she's the one who built it. Each pin has a specific purpose. Some are holding the main structure of the knot. Others are securing the added hair pieces. Still others are creating the smooth waves at your temples or tucking away flyaway strands. After about 10 pins have been removed, you can feel your hair beginning to loosen. The tight pulling sensation across your crown eases slightly. Your head feels lighter. But Mary is nowhere near finished. There are dozens more pins to go. Buried deep in the layers of hair and hair pieces, Victorian hairstyles are engineered to survive an entire day of activity walking, dancing, riding in carriages, even moderate exercise. They cannot be allowed to collapse at an inopportune moment, so they're pinned within an inch of their lives. You watch Mary's face in the mirror as she works. Her expression is focused but relaxed, her fingers moving with practiced confidence. She doesn't have to think about what she's doing. Her hands know the way through the maze of your hair. How many hours has she spent doing this? If she's been your maid for 3 years, and she dresses your hair every morning and undresses it every night, that's over 2,000 repetitions of this exact task. Her muscle memory must be extraordinary. "Your hair has gotten longer, ma'am," Mary observes as she works. "It's past your shoulder blades now when it's down." You hadn't really noticed, but she's right. Victorian ladies are encouraged to grow their hair as long as possible, waist length or beyond if achievable. Long, thick hair is considered a sign of health, femininity, and good breeding. Women with thin or short hair are pitied and often resort to wearing wigs or extensive hair pieces to compensate. The hair trade is a thriving industry, with impoverished women selling their hair to merchants who process it into switches, wigs, and padding for the wealthy. Historians still argue whether this constituted exploitation or simply a pragmatic market transaction, but you suspect the women selling their hair out of desperation would have strong opinions on that debate. More pins come out. Clink, clink, clink. The dish is filling up now, a small pile of bent wire that represents the infrastructure of your fashionable appearance. You count them absently: 23, 24, 25. Each one is a tiny investment in maintaining the illusion of effortless beauty. Nothing about Victorian femininity is effortless. Of course, it requires hours of labour, considerable expense, and a high tolerance for discomfort. Mary begins removing the hair pieces now. The first one is a small pad called a rat, a mesh cushion stuffed with horsehair or, ironically, with your own hair saved from previous brushings. The rat was pinned to the crown of your head this morning to create extra volume, giving you the fashionable height and fullness that natural hair alone cannot achieve. Mary pulls it free, and suddenly your hair deflates slightly, losing some of its impressive bulk. Next comes a switch, a long piece of purchased hair attached to a small comb. This was worked into your own hair to add length and thickness to the knot at the back. Mary unwinds it carefully, separating the false hair from your real hair, and sets it aside to be brushed and stored properly. Hair pieces are expensive and must be maintained meticulously. They have to be cleaned, conditioned, and stored on special stands to maintain their shape. With the hair pieces removed, Mary returns to extracting pins from your natural hair. The structure is really coming apart now. You can feel your hair starting to fall, sections dropping down against your neck and shoulders as their support system is dismantled. The sensation is deeply satisfying, like finally being allowed to put down a heavy weight you've been carrying all day. More pins. 30, 31, 32. How is it possible that your head was supporting this much metal? The weight of the pins alone must add several ounces to your skull. Add the hair itself, both natural and false, and you've been carrying an extra pound or more on top of your head all day. No wonder you sometimes get headaches that start at the base of your skull and radiate forward. Mary pulls out pin 35, and suddenly a large section of hair at the back tumbles down. You feel it sliding against your neck, heavy and slightly damp with sweat. She catches the falling mass and supports it while she removes the remaining pins holding the last structural elements in place. 38, 39, 40. The dish on the dressing table is full now. A small mountain of hairpins that will need to be sorted and cleaned tomorrow before being used again. With the final pins removed, your hair falls completely free for the first time since morning. The relief is extraordinary. The weight of your hair, and it is heavy. A thick mass that falls to your mid-back is now distributed naturally, instead of being gathered and pinned into an artificial arrangement. Your scalp tingles all over as blood flow returns fully to areas that have been compressed. You run your fingers through your hair tentatively, feeling the ridges and bumps where pins have been pressing against your skull all day. But you're not finished yet. Your hair is down, but it's a tangled mess from being pinned and twisted for 14 hours. Mary picks up your hairbrush, a fine silver-backed brush with boar bristles, part of a matching set that was a wedding gift, and begins the nightly brushing ritual. This is supposed to be good for your hair, distributing natural oils from scalp to ends, stimulating blood flow, removing tangles and debris. The Victorian ideal is 100 strokes per night. Though honestly, who has time to count? Mary usually does about 50, which seems sufficient. The brush pulls through your hair, meeting resistance in the tangled sections and gliding smoothly through the straighter parts. Mary works from the bottom up, starting with the ends and gradually moving toward your scalp, exactly as she was trained. Starting at the top and brushing down would just push the tangles lower and make them worse. Every lady's maid knows this. But you'd be surprised how many women try to brush their own hair and do it wrong. Mary continues brushing, her strokes becoming longer and more confident as the tangles work themselves out. Your hair is naturally wavy, and when it's down and brushed properly, it falls in loose ripples down your back, catching the candlelight with subtle shifts of colour, brown with hints of auburn, when the light hits just right. Victorian beauty standards favour your colouring not too dark, not too light, conventional and respectable. If you had red hair, you'd be considered flamboyant and possibly loose moraled. If you had very dark hair, you'd be seen as exotic, possibly foreign. Your medium brown is safely unremarkable, which in Victorian terms means appropriately feminine. The brush moves through your hair now with barely any resistance. And Mary begins the counting that marks the final phase of the ritual. 31, 32, 33, she murmurs under her breath, just loud enough for you to hear. The counting is partly to ensure she does enough strokes, but it's also become a kind of meditation, a signal that the day is truly ending. When the counting begins, you can feel your body starting to relax in anticipation of sleep. You watch in the mirror as the brush moves through your hair again and again. There's something mesmerizing about the repetitive motion, the way your hair lifts slightly with each stroke and then falls back into place. The bristles scratch lightly against your scalp, creating a pleasant tingling sensation that seems to spread down your spine. Your eyelids are getting heavy, and you have to resist the urge to simply close them and drift off right here at the dressing table. 45, 46, 47. Mary counts, her voice a soft murmur. Almost done. Your hair is fully brushed out now, smooth and shining, crackling slightly with static in the dry evening air. In a moment, Mary will braid it for the night. Leaving it loose would result in impossible tangles by morning, but first she finishes the full count of 50 strokes. 48, 49, 50. She sets the brush down and gathers your hair in her hands, dividing it into 3 sections with the quick efficiency of long practice. Her fingers work rapidly, plaiting the sections over and under, creating a thick braid that will keep your hair contained and relatively tangle-free while you sleep. The braid grows longer as she works her way down, and when she reaches the ends, she secures it with a ribbon soft cotton. Not the silk ribbons you wear during the day, because those can slip out during the night. The braid swings heavily against your back when Mary releases it, a thick rope of hair that falls past your shoulder blades. You can feel its weight, solid and real, so different from the artificial construction you wore all day. This is your actual hair, undisguised and undecorated, and there's something honest about it that feels appropriate for nighttime. But Mary isn't quite finished with your head. She produces the nightcap, that most maligned and mocked item of Victorian sleepwear, and you suppress a sigh. You hate the nightcap, but it makes you look ridiculous, like a character from a children's storybook. But your mother insisted when you were first married that proper ladies wear nightcaps to bed, and Mary has continued the tradition without question. The cap serves several purposes. It keeps your hair clean for longer between washings. It prevents your braid from coming undone during the night, and it supposedly protects your hair from damage. Whether any of this is actually true or just Victorian superstition, you couldn't say. The nightcap is made from fine white cotton, gathered at the crown and edged with a ruffle of eyelet lace around the face. There's a ribbon that ties under your chin, which you absolutely refuse to use because you're not a complete caricature. Mary settles the cap over your head, tucking your braid up inside and arranging the lace ruffle so it frames your face in what she apparently believes is a flattering manner. You look at yourself in the mirror and see exactly what you expected a woman dressed for bed, in a style that makes her look about 12 years old and slightly ridiculous. "Perfect, ma'am," Mary says with satisfaction, apparently not noticing or not caring about your expression of resigned tolerance. You stand up from the dressing table, and Mary moves to the washstand to begin the next phase of evening preparations, your facial cleansing routine. The Victorian approach to skincare is surprisingly elaborate, involving multiple steps and various potions that promise to preserve your complexion against the ravages of time and weather. Whether they actually work is debatable, but the ritual itself has become so ingrained in your routine that skipping it would feel wrong, like going to bed without brushing your teeth. Mary has already prepared the wash basin with warm water. She must have brought it up from the kitchen while you weren't paying attention, probably during the hair brushing phase. Steam rises gently from the basin, and she tests the temperature with her fingers before dipping a soft cloth into it. The first step is simply washing your face with warm water to remove the surface dirt and oil that have accumulated during the day. She wrings out the cloth and brings it to your face, wiping gently across your forehead, down your nose, across your cheeks. The warm moisture feels wonderful, opening your pores and softening your skin. She dips and wrings the cloth several times, washing your entire face and then your neck, removing the invisible film of London air or Boston air or Melbourne air that settles on exposed skin throughout the day. Victorian cities are filthy places, full of coal smoke and factory emissions and horse dung dust that gets kicked up by traffic. Just walking down the street coats you in a fine layer of urban grime. With your face clean, Mary reaches for the cold cream. This is the cornerstone of Victorian skincare, a thick, white cream made from oils and waxes that's been used for centuries. Your particular cold cream comes from a fashionable chemist shop on Bond Street and supposedly contains almond oil, white wax, rose water, and something called spermaceti, which you learn to your horror is actually extracted from whale heads. The Victorians will put absolutely anything on their faces if someone tells them it's beautifying. Mary scoops out a generous amount of cold cream with her fingers and begins applying it to your face in upward strokes, always upward, never downward, because downward strokes supposedly encourage sagging. She works the cream into your skin thoroughly, covering every inch of your face and neck with a thick white layer that makes you look rather ghostly in the mirror. The cream is cool and slightly greasy, and it smells strongly of roses with an underlying waxy scent that you've never quite gotten used to. The cold cream is supposed to sit on your skin for several minutes to draw out impurities, whatever that means. While you wait, Mary tidies the dressing table, returning hairpins to their box, putting away the hairbrush and combs, closing the lids on various pots and bottles. You sit very still, trying not to touch your cream-covered face, feeling the strange sensation of the thick substance sitting on your skin. Historians still argue whether Victorian skincare routines were actually beneficial, or whether some of the ingredients, particularly the ones containing lead, mercury, or arsenic, caused more harm than good. Your cold cream supposedly doesn't contain any heavy metals, but how would you really know the chemist could be putting anything in there? And you'd have no way to verify it. The lack of regulation in the cosmetics industry is somewhat terrifying when you stop to think about it, so mostly you try not to think about it. After what feels like an appropriate interval, Mary returns with a fresh warm cloth and begins removing the cold cream. She wipes it away in firm strokes, taking with it theoretically all the dirt, oil and impurities that have accumulated in your pores. The cloth comes away white and slightly greasy, streaked with the cream and whatever else it's managed to extract from your skin. She rinses the cloth, wipes again, rinses, wipes, until your face is completely clean of cream. Now your skin feels tight and dry, stripped of its natural oils by the enthusiastic cleansing. This is where the next step comes in rosewater and glycerin lotion, a lighter preparation that's supposed to restore moisture without clogging pores. Mary pours a small amount onto a clean cloth and pats it gently over your face and neck. The rosewater smells sweet and fresh, much nicer than the waxy cold cream, and the glycerin leaves your skin feeling soft and slightly sticky. The final step is a tiny amount of almond oil pressed gently around your eyes, where the skin is most delicate and prone to wrinkles. Victorian ladies live in terror of wrinkles, crow's feet, and any other signs of aging. You're only 28, but already you've started noticing fine lines at the corners of your eyes, and the thought of them deepening into visible creases keeps you faithful to your nightly routine even when you're exhausted. With your face properly cleansed and moisturized, Mary moves to the final elements of your bedtime preparations. You stand up from the dressing table and follow her into the adjoining bedroom, where the bed has been waiting patiently through this entire elaborate undressing ceremony. The bedroom is cooler than the dressing room. The fire here has been allowed to burn lower, maintaining just enough heat to keep the room from being truly cold, but not so much that you'll wake up overheated in the middle of the night. The Victorians have strong opinions about bedroom temperatures and fresh air circulation, believing that proper ventilation is essential for healthful sleep. The bed itself dominates the room, a massive four-poster affair made from dark mahogany, with heavy curtains that can be drawn close to create a private cocoon within the larger space. The curtains are currently tied back, revealing the bed in its prepared state. Mary has already been in here while you were at the dressing table, performing the necessary tasks to make the bed ready for occupancy. The covers have been turned down, revealing crisp white linen sheets that were put on fresh this morning. The pillows have been plumped and arranged. The hot warming pan that was placed between the sheets an hour ago has been removed, leaving behind a pocket of delicious warmth that will make sliding into bed less shocking. But before you can get into bed, there's one more somewhat indelicate matter to attend to the chamber pot. It's stored in a cabinet in the bedside table, a large ceramic pot with a lid, decorated with blue flowers in an attempt to make a utilitarian object seem less utilitarian. Victorian modesty requires that bodily functions be concealed and never discussed. But Victorian practicality requires that women have access to toilet facilities at night without having to venture out to the water closet down the hall. Mary discreetly withdraws to give you privacy. This is one of the few moments in the entire undressing ritual where she's not directly involved. You open the cabinet, remove the chamber pot, and attend to your needs quickly and efficiently. The pot will be emptied and cleaned by a housemaid tomorrow morning before you wake. One of the many invisible tasks that maintain the smooth functioning of a Victorian household. You replace the lid, return the pot to its cabinet, and call Mary back in. She'd brought the ewer of water for the washstand in the bedroom different from the dressing room washstand. Because apparently you need washing facilities in multiple locations, you wash your hands thoroughly with soap and dry them on a towel, completing the final hygienic preparation before bed. Victorian handbooks are emphatic about the importance of washing hands before sleep, though their reasoning has more to do with moral cleanliness than germ theory, which is still a relatively new and controversial concept. Now, finally, you're ready to actually get into bed. Mary holds back the covers while you approach, and you place one slippered foot on the bed step, yes. The bed is so high that it requires a small wooden step to climb into it, and then the other foot, and then you're standing on the step, and then you're lowering yourself onto the mattress, which is made from layers of horsehair and cotton batting, topped with a feather bed that compresses softly under your weight. You swing your legs up onto the bed and slide them under the covers, and the warmth that Mary created with the warming pan envelops your feet and legs immediately. It's glorious. The sheets are smooth and cool against your skin where the warming pan didn't reach, but your lower body is nestled in perfect warmth. You lean back against the banked pillows. There are 4 of them. 2 regular sleeping pillows and 2 larger European squares that provide support for sitting up, and Mary begins tucking the covers around you with the same care she applies to everything else. The bedding itself is a complicated affair of layers. First there are the linen sheets, then a light wool blanket, then a heavier wool blanket, then a quilted coverlet, and finally a heavy brocade bedspread that's more decorative than functional but adds another layer of warmth. Mary tucks all these layers around your body, creating a cocoon of fabric that will keep you warm through the night. Victorian bedrooms are kept quite cool. Your mother always said that fresh air was essential for health, and without adequate bedding you'd wake up shivering at 3 in the morning. She adjusts the pillows behind your back, making sure they're properly positioned for comfort. Victorian ladies don't simply lie down flat immediately. There's usually a period of sitting up in bed, perhaps reading or doing needlework or simply thinking quiet thoughts while the body transitions from wakefulness to sleep. You're supposed to avoid mental stimulation right before bed. No exciting novels. No troubling conversations because overexcitement of the brain supposedly leads to restless sleep and disturbing dreams. Mary has placed your book on the bedside table. Should you wanted a volume of Tennyson's poetry deemed sufficiently calming for bedtime reading, there's also a glass of water, should you wake thirsty in the night, and a candle in a secure holder, should you need to get up for any reason. Everything has been anticipated, every need provided for. This is what it means to be a Victorian lady, to move through life surrounded by this kind of careful attention, to have your path smoothed by invisible hands, to never have to think about the logistics of basic comfort because someone else is thinking about them for you. But with this care comes a kind of helplessness. You literally cannot dress or undress yourself without assistance. Your hair is too complicated to arrange alone. The fastenings on your clothing are positioned where you cannot reach them. You are physically dependent on your servant in ways that sometimes feel uncomfortably infantilizing. And yet this dependency is what marks you as a lady working women dress themselves. After all, because they have no choice. Your helplessness is a privilege. Strange as that sounds. Mary moves around the room now, performing the final tasks of the evening. She closes the curtains more tightly, blocking out any drafts from the window. She checks the fire, adding one more piece of coal to keep it burning low through the night. She collects the clothing you wore today, the dress that will be hung, the petticoats that will be aired, the undergarments that will be laundered, and drapes them over her arm. She picks up the shoes and the stockings and the corset. She's carrying away the entire architecture of your daily identity, leaving you here in bed in your simple nightgown and ridiculous nightcap, reduced to your most basic self. Before she leaves, she comes to the bedside one more time. "Is there anything else you need, ma'am?" she asks quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking louder might shatter the peaceful atmosphere of the bedroom. You consider, is there anything else, any other need that hasn't been anticipated and met? You can't think of anything. Your body has been freed from its constraints, cleaned, moisturized, and tucked into a warm bed. Your hair has been brushed and braided. Your face has been creamed. Your bladder has been emptied. Every physical need has been addressed with Victorian thoroughness. "No, Mary, thank you. You may go." You tell her, and she bobs a small curtsy even now. Even in this intimate setting, the formalities of class distinction must be observed. "Good night, ma'am. Sleep well," she says. And then she's moving toward the door, her arms full of your discarded layers, her footsteps quiet on the carpet. She pauses at the door to look back, checking one more time that everything is in order, and then she slips out into the hallway, pulling the door closed behind her with barely a click. The silence of the bedroom settles around you like another layer of bedding, soft and encompassing. You can hear the house settling into its nighttime rhythms, the distant sound of servants moving through the lower floors, completing their own evening tasks, the creak of floorboards as the wood adjusts to the cooling temperature, the faint whistle of wind outside the window, pressing against the glass. London, or wherever you are tonight, continues its life beyond these walls. But you're safely cocooned inside, separated from the city by layers of brick, plaster, curtains, and privilege. You shift slightly in the bed, adjusting your position, and become aware of your body in a way you haven't been all day. When you're dressed, your body is hidden, controlled, shaped into something other than itself. But now, beneath the thin linen nightgown and the weight of blankets, you can feel your actual form, the softness of your stomach, no longer flattened by corset compression, the natural curve of your waist, wider than fashion prefers, the heaviness of your breasts, freed from the uplift and separation that daytime undergarments create. This is your real body, the one that exists when no one is looking, when there's no need to maintain the illusion of ideal proportions. You run your hands down your sides beneath the covers, tracing the red marks that are still visible on your skin. The corset has left its signature across your torso vertical lines, where the whalebone stays pressed deepest. A horizontal groove where the bottom edge cut across your hips. A broader band of redness across your ribs where the compression was most intense. These marks will fade overnight, and by morning your skin will look normal again, ready to be marked anew by tomorrow's corset. It's a daily cycle of compression and release, like the tides, your body adapting and readapting to the demands placed upon it. The marks don't hurt exactly, but they're tender to the touch, and there's a deep ache in your muscles from holding the rigid posture that the corset demanded. Your back is especially sore, those muscles along your spine that worked all day to keep you upright despite the unnatural forward tilt of your pelvis that the bustle created. You arch your back experimentally, pressing your spine into the mattress, and feel a satisfying series of small pops as vertebrae realign themselves. Tomorrow you'll do it all again, the compression, the restriction, the careful construction of a fashionable silhouette. But tonight, your body is your own. You think about the women who don't get this relief. Working class women who sleep in their day clothes because they don't own nightgowns, or who share beds with so many family members that undressing would be impractical. Women in poor houses or prisons, sleeping in whatever they're given with no privacy and no comfort. Women in hospitals, in asylums, in brothels. Your elaborate undressing ritual is such a specific experience, limited to a particular class of women in a particular historical moment. Historians still argue whether the physical constraints of Victorian fashion were worse for women than the social constraints, or whether they were really just different expressions of the same impulse to control and contain female bodies. You reach for the book on your bedside table, Tennyson's poetry, carefully selected for its calming properties, but your hand stops before it reaches the volume. You're not sure you want to read right now. Reading requires a kind of attention that you're not certain you possess at the moment. Your mind is tired but also restless, full of half-formed thoughts and observations that don't quite cohere into anything purposeful. The mental state that comes after a long day, when you're too exhausted to think clearly but too wound up to simply drift off. Instead, you let your hand fall back to the coverlet and simply lie there, watching the shadows cast by the candles dance across the ceiling. The candles are beeswax, expensive but worth it for the clean. Bright light and the pleasant honey smell. Tallow candles smell like rendered animal fat, which is exactly what they are, and while they're cheaper, you can afford to be particular. Another small privilege, barely worth noticing until you think about all the people who read by tallow light, or worse, by no light at all, going to bed when the sun sets because they can't afford illumination. The ceiling above you is decorated with plasterwork, ornate medallions and cornices that were fashionable when the house was built 30 years ago. In the flickering candlelight, the plaster moulding seems to move, creating the illusion of depth and shadow. You've stared at this ceiling hundreds of times, but you've never really looked at it, never traced the patterns with your eyes the way you're doing now. There's something about the vulnerability of lying in bed, stripped of your daily armour, that makes you notice things differently. Your feet are warm now, thoroughly warmed by the lingering heat from the warming pan. The warming pan itself is a copper vessel with a long handle, filled with hot coals from the fire, that Mary slides between the sheets about an hour before bedtime. It takes the edge off the coldness of linen sheets, making the bed inviting instead of forbidding. In the depths of winter, that warming pan is the difference between being able to sleep and lying awake shivering. Tonight, in this transitional season, not quite winter but no longer autumn, the warming is welcome but not essential. You wiggle your toes beneath the covers, enjoying the simple pleasure of warmth and freedom. Your toes have been compressed in narrow boots for so long that they spread naturally now feels almost decadent. Victorian boot fashion requires toes to be squeezed into unnaturally narrow spaces, creating the illusion of delicate, childlike feet. The result is often bunions, corns, and permanently deformed toes. Your own feet show the early signs of this deformation. Your big toes angle slightly inward, and you have calluses on your little toes where they press against the sides of your boots. But you're only 28. Women in their 50s who've been wearing fashionable boots their entire adult lives have feet that are truly grotesque, though of course no one ever sees them except their ladies' maids. The thought of your feet leads you to think about aging generally, about what your body will look like in 20 years, in 40 years. Will you be one of those elderly Victorian ladies who seem to be composed entirely of angles and rigidity, held upright more by corset than by skeleton, or will you soften into comfortable old age? Finally permitted to abandon the strictures of fashion in favour of practical clothing. The Victorian attitude toward aging women is complicated respect for matrons and grandmothers, but also a kind of dismissal, as if women past childbearing age become less interesting, less worthy of attention. But that's decades away. Tonight you're still young, still married, still presumably capable of bearing the children you haven't yet managed to produce despite 3 years of trying. That's another source of anxiety that you push away when it surfaces, another failure to conform to expectations. Victorian wives are supposed to produce heirs with efficient regularity. Your own childlessness is a subject of increasingly pointed questions from relatives and barely concealed speculation from acquaintances. Is something wrong with you, with your husband? Are you doing something to prevent conception? Some secret sin of family limitation? You push these thoughts away. Bedtime is not the time for worrying about things you cannot control. The point of this elaborate bedtime ritual, the undressing, the cleansing, the careful preparation is to create a mental and physical state conducive to rest. Lying here cataloguing your anxieties defeats the entire purpose. You take a deep breath, feeling your ribcage expand fully without the constraint of the corset. The sensation is still remarkable even though you experience it every night, that feeling of lungs filling completely, of breathing deeply and easily. During the day, your breathing is shallow by necessity, limited to the upper portion of your chest. At night, you can breathe like a normal human being. The candles are burning lower now, their flames starting to gutter slightly as they reach the end of the wax. Soon you'll need to extinguish them, and then the room will be dark except for the faint glow from the fireplace. Victorian bedrooms are never completely dark. There's always some source of light, whether from banked coals or street lamps outside or moonlight through these windows. Complete darkness is considered somehow dangerous, as if you might lose yourself in it, become disoriented and fall or injure yourself if you need to rise in the night. You should probably put out the candles now and settle yourself for sleep. The process of undressing has taken the better part of an hour, and it must be nearly 10 o'clock. Respectable ladies are in bed by 10, asleep by past. Your husband. If he's home tonight, you realise with a start that you're not entirely sure where he is this evening. Whether he mentioned dinner at his club or a business meeting or simply a late night at the office will arrive in his own room adjacent to yours sometime later. Victorian couples of your class maintain separate bedrooms, visiting each other only for specific purposes. Sleeping separately the rest of the time is more civilized that way. Everyone says more conducive to restful sleep. You reach for the candle snuffer on the bedside table, a small brass cone on a handle, designed to extinguish flames without creating smoke or spattering hot wax, before electric lighting revolutionizes everything in a few decades. Fire management is a constant preoccupation in Victorian households. Every open flame is a potential disaster, and the ritual of extinguishing candles before sleep is performed with the same care as lighting them in the first place. You position the snuffer over the first candle and lower it slowly until the cone encompasses the flame. The light flickers and dies, leaving a thin trail of smoke that smells faintly of beeswax and burnt wick. The second candle follows, and then the third. With each extinguished flame, the room grows dimmer, shadows deepening in the corners, the ceiling receding into darkness. Only the fireplace remains, casting a warm orange glow across the nearest wall and creating shifting patterns of light and shadow. The fire has burned down to coals now, red and glowing but without active flames, producing steady heat without the danger of sparks or excessive light. You settle yourself more deeply into the pillows, adjusting your nightgown where it's twisted around your legs, making sure the covers are tucked securely around your shoulders. The bed is warm and soft. Your body is clean and released from its daily constraints, and you should be ready to sleep. But your mind is still active, turning over the events of the day, planning tomorrow's activities, worrying about small things that seem larger in the darkness. This is the problem with the elaborate bedtime ritual. It addresses the physical preparation for sleep, but does nothing about the mental preparation. Your body is ready to rest, but your thoughts continue racing along their well-worn tracks. You think about the morning calls you need to make tomorrow, the letter you should write to your sister, the household accounts that need reviewing, the menu you need to approve with a cook. Victorian ladies may not do physical labour, but the mental and emotional labour of managing a household and maintaining social connections is exhausting in its own way. You try to clear your mind using the techniques you've been taught. Breathe slowly and deeply. Focus on the sensations of warmth and comfort. Imagine pleasant scenes. Count backward from 100. Some nights these techniques work beautifully, and you slide into sleep within minutes. Other nights your brain refuses to cooperate, and you lie awake for hours, watching the shadows shift as the coals burn lower, listening to the house creak and settle, thinking thoughts that go nowhere productive. Tonight seems to be somewhere in between. You're tired, genuinely tired in your bones and muscles, but not yet sleepy in that heavy, irresistible way that makes your eyelids droop and your thoughts blur. You're in the transitional space between wakefulness and sleep, and you could tip either direction depending on whether you can quiet your mind sufficiently. You think about Mary, now in her own small room in the servants' quarters at the top of the house. She still has work to do before she can sleep. She needs to hang your dress properly, air your petticoats, sort the items that need laundering, prepare your clothes for tomorrow morning. Her day is longer than yours, beginning earlier and ending later, and her bed is certainly not as comfortable as this one. Does she resent the inequality? Does she lie awake in her narrow servant's bed thinking about how unfair it is that she works so hard while you do whatever it is that you do, which from the outside probably doesn't look like work at all? You've never asked her these questions. Of course. The social distance between mistress and servant is carefully maintained. Even in moments of physical intimacy like the undressing ritual, Mary has dressed you and undressed you, seen your naked body, touched your skin, held your most intimate garments, but you don't really know her thoughts or feelings beyond the narrow band of information relevant to her duties. You know she's 23, that she came from a village in Hampshire, that she's been in service since she was 12. But you don't know if she's happy or sad, content or resentful, whether she has hopes and dreams beyond her current position, or whether she's accepted her place in the social order as simply the way things are. Historians still argue whether Victorian servants generally accepted their subordinate positions or whether they secretly harboured revolutionary sentiments, biding their time until they could overthrow the class system entirely. The answer is probably that different servants felt different things, just as different mistresses have different relationships with their maids. But the structure of the relationship makes genuine understanding difficult. How can you truly know someone whose livelihood depends on pleasing you? Who can be dismissed for displeasing you? Whose every interaction with you is shaped by the power differential between you? These are not comfortable thoughts to have while lying in your comfortable bed, surrounded by evidence of your comfortable life. You push them away and try to focus on something more pleasant. The Tennyson volume is still on the bedside table, and you consider lighting a candle again to read a poem or two, but the effort required to sit up, find matches, relight a candle, open the book, it all seems too much. You're already positioned for sleep, and disturbing that position might make falling asleep even more difficult. Instead, you try reciting poetry from memory, letting the familiar rhythms lull your mind into quietness. The woods decay and fall. The vapours weep their burthen to the ground. Man comes and tills the field and lies beneath, and after many a summer dies the swan. Tennyson's Tithonus, learned by heart during your girlhood education. The melancholy verses about immortality and aging seem oddly appropriate for this moment of transition between day and night. Between consciousness and sleep, you continue reciting silently, feeling the words form in your mind without quite speaking them aloud. Me only cruel immortality consumes, I wither slowly in thine arms, here at the quiet limit of the world. The poem goes on, but your memory of it becomes hazier as you progress through the verses. You lose the thread somewhere around the silver star thy guide and find yourself drifting, the words dissolving into vague impressions of meaning rather than specific lines. Your breathing has slowed without you noticing, becoming deeper and more regular. The tension in your shoulders, tension you weren't even aware you were carrying, has begun to release. Your thoughts are becoming less linear, more dreamlike. Images and sensations replacing the verbal commentary that's been running through your mind all evening. You see colours behind your closed eyelids. Did you close your eyes? You must have shifting patterns of red and orange and gold that might be the afterimage of candlelight or might be the beginning of dreams. The bed has become a boat floating on a dark sea. Or perhaps it's more accurate to say that you feel as if you're floating, suspended between the mattress and the blankets, weightless and warm. The aches in your muscles from the day's corseting are fading into background sensations, still present but no longer demanding attention. Your body is settling into the specific stillness that precedes sleep, that moment when physical discomfort recedes and comfort becomes the dominant sensation. You think vaguely about tomorrow's corset, waiting in your dressing room to be laced onto your body again. The thought would normally provoke some feeling resignation, perhaps, or mild dread, but right now you can't quite summon the energy to care. Tomorrow is an abstraction, a problem for your future self to address. Right now there is only warmth and darkness and the gentle pull of sleep. A sound penetrates your drowsing consciousness. Footsteps in the hallway outside your room, measured and quiet. Your husband, perhaps, heading to his own bedroom after whatever evening activities occupied him, or a servant making final rounds, checking that fires are banked and doors are locked. You should probably know which should be aware of the household's movements, but you can't quite bring yourself to care enough to identify the source. The footsteps pass your door and continue down the hallway, fading into silence. The room is very dark now. The coals in the fireplace have burned down to almost nothing, barely glowing, producing more heat than light. The darkness is soft and encompassing rather than frightening, a natural darkness that invites rest. Your eyes have adjusted enough that you can see the faint outlines of furniture, the wardrobe against the far wall, the dressing table with its mirror catching the last glimmers of firelight, the chair where Mary folded your dressing gown. You shift one more time, seeking the perfect position for sleep. Your braided hair lies heavy against your back. The nightcap sits on your head like a ridiculous crown. The nightgown tangles slightly around your knees. You adjust, smooth, settle. Your right hand finds its customary position tucked under the pillow. Your left arm lies across your stomach, rising and falling with your slow breathing. Your feet find each other under the covers, one ankle crossing the other in the position you've slept in since childhood. Sleep doesn't arrive all at once, but rather in stages, like walking down a staircase into a progressively deeper darkness. You're aware of descending, aware that each breath takes you further from full consciousness. But you can't quite pinpoint the moment when true sleep begins. Your thoughts become fragments, incomplete sentences that trail off into nothing. The red marks on your torso seem to pulse gently, not with pain, but with a kind of presence, a reminder that your body has been through something today and is now recovering. You think about all the other women lying in beds across London at this moment, performing their own versions of this nightly ritual. Thousands of them, perhaps tens of thousands, all going through similar routines of undressing, washing and settling. The wealthy ones with their ladies' maids and elaborate corsets and silk nightgowns. The middle-class ones managing with less help. Perhaps a single housemaid shared among the family. Simpler undergarments, but still the essential structure of Victorian femininity. The poor ones with no help at all, falling into bed exhausted from factory work or domestic service, lucky to have a bed to themselves, wearing whatever they can afford. And beyond London, the same rituals multiplying across the empire. Women in Boston undressing from their American-made corsets, women in Melbourne loosening their stays in the southern hemisphere summer heat, women in Bombay, in Hong Kong, in Cape Town, all participants in this global performance of Victorian womanhood, all bound by similar expectations about how ladies should dress and behave and present themselves to the world. The sun never sets on the British Empire, the saying goes, and apparently the sun never sets on Victorian corsets either. Your mind drifts to historical comparisons, to women in other eras and their own complicated relationships with clothing and the body. Did medieval women feel this same relief when they removed their kirtles and veils? Did Georgian ladies experience similar liberation when their stays finally came off? Will women 100 years from now look back at your generation and marvel at the elaborate architecture you subjected yourselves to daily? Or will they still be wearing their own versions of restrictive clothing, still performing their own rituals of presentation and concealment? The thought dissolves before you can follow it to any conclusion. Your mind is moving too slowly now for sustained reflection, thoughts appearing and disappearing like fish breaking the surface of a pond. You're aware of your breathing, of the rise and fall of your chest beneath the covers, of the weight of blankets pressing gently down on you. The sensation is comforting rather than confining, unlike the corset's pressure, which was rigid and controlling. The blanket's weight is soft and protective. You think you hear rain beginning outside, a gentle patter against the window glass. But you're not sure if it's real or imagined. Victorian London is often rainy, and the sound of rain on windows is such a common nighttime accompaniment that your mind might simply be supplying the expected soundtrack. Real or imagined, the sound is soothing, creating a cocoon of white noise that helps mask the other sounds of the house and street. Your body has found its sleeping position now, the arrangement of limbs and spine that allows muscles to fully relax. You're lying slightly on your right side, not quite full side sleeping, but not flat on your back either. A compromise position that accommodates your braided hair and allows your breathing to flow easily. The pillow cradles your head at just the right angle, neither too high nor too low, supporting your neck without straining it. After an entire day of maintaining artificial posture, your spine is grateful for the opportunity to curve naturally. The nightcap has shifted slightly, and you can feel it sitting askew on your head, but you can't quite summon the energy to adjust it, Tomorrow morning when you wake, it will probably be halfway off, the ribbon untied, the cap bunched up somewhere around your ear. Mary will find it amusing when she comes to wake you, will smile her small private smile as she removes the dishevelled cap and begins the morning process of putting you back together again. But that's tomorrow's concern, not tonight's. You become aware of your heartbeat, slow and steady, pulsing through your body with reassuring regularity. During the day, you rarely notice your heart unless you're exerting yourself, climbing stairs or walking quickly or experiencing strong emotion. But in the stillness before sleep, you can feel it clearly, the reliable pump that's been working since before you were born and will continue working until the day you die. Victorian doctors are fascinated by the heart, studying it, measuring it, theorizing about its relationship to emotions and vitality. But right now it's simply doing its job, circulating blood through your released and relaxing body. Your thoughts touch briefly on your husband again, wondering if he is in his own bed now in the adjacent room. You could call out to him through the connecting door if you wanted, could invite him to your room or ask to visit his. Victorian marriages of your class treat marital intimacy as something scheduled and purposeful, not spontaneous or casual. Tonight you're too tired for that kind of visit, too absorbed in your own process of settling into sleep. Perhaps tomorrow night, or the night after, when you're less exhausted and more inclined toward that particular form of physical connection. The thought drifts away without creating any particular feeling or desire. Your body right now wants only rest, only the deep unconsciousness that will allow muscles to repair and mind to process the day's experiences. The elaborate undressing ritual has prepared you for this, has removed all the physical barriers to comfort and created the conditions for sleep to arrive naturally and fully. You realize with a distant corner of your mind that you're very close now, that you've descended most of the staircase into sleep and are approaching the final step. Your breathing has become so slow and deep that you're barely conscious of it. Your body has gone still, no longer making small adjustments of position. The darkness behind your eyelids has deepened from red tinge to pure black, and the random patterns of colour have resolved into nothingness. The last coherent thought you have before sleep claims you entirely is about the morning, about how in just a few hours Mary will return to begin the whole process in reverse. She'll open the curtains to let in daylight, bring tea and wash water, help you into your morning wrapper, and then begin the elaborate construction of your daily appearance. The chemise and drawers, the corset with its 24 whalebone stays, the corset cover, the petticoats, 3 of them, maybe 4 depending on the weather and your activities, the bustle, the dress with its 43 buttons, the boots with their 22 buttons each, the collar, the jewellery. Your hair will be brushed and twisted and pinned into fashionable architecture. Your face will be powdered and perhaps lightly tinted. You'll be transformed from this soft, natural, nighttime version of yourself into the public presentation that Victorian society demands. But that's hours away. Right now you're here, in the darkness, in the warmth, in the final moments before consciousness dissolves entirely. Your last awareness is of gratitude for the soft bed, for the warm covers, for the relief of released corset stays, for the simple animal comfort of a body allowed to rest in its natural state. And then sleep arrives, and there are no more thoughts at all. The darkness becomes complete, not the darkness of closed eyes in a dim room, but the darkness of true unconsciousness. Your breathing slows even further, deepening into the rhythm of genuine sleep. The small muscle twitches that sometimes accompany the transition from waking to sleeping have passed, and your body lies perfectly still beneath the covers, all tension finally released. In this state, you're unaware of the house continuing its nighttime existence around you, the servants finishing their final tasks in the kitchen below, the coals in your fireplace dimming to ash, the temperature in your bedroom dropping slowly as the fire dies completely, the street outside growing quieter as London's nighttime activities wind down. All of this happens without your knowledge or participation, because you finally achieved what the entire elaborate undressing ritual was designed to produce: complete, restful unconsciousness. Your body, released from its daily constraints, does what bodies are meant to do during sleep. It repairs, restores, processes, consolidates. The red marks from your corset begin their slow fade. The aching muscles in your back and feet start their recovery. Your digestive system, given the space it was denied all day, continues its work without the interference of tight lacing. Blood flows freely through vessels no longer compressed. Your lungs expand fully with each breath, processing oxygen without restriction. This is the gift of night, the compensation for the constraints of day. For these hours, your body belongs to itself again. The night deepens around you, hours passing in unconscious silence. Your sleep cycles through its natural phases: the light sleep of initial descent, the deeper sleep where your body does its most restorative work, the dream-filled periods where your mind processes the day's experiences in surreal, symbolic forms. You're unaware of these transitions, experiencing them only as a continuous darkness punctuated occasionally by fragmentary images that you won't remember in the morning. At some point in the deepest part of night, perhaps 2 or 3 in the morning, you stir slightly, shifting position without fully waking. Your body has grown uncomfortable in one position and needs to adjust. A automatic process that happens several times each night without ever quite breaking through to consciousness. You roll from your right side to your left, the braid of your hair shifting across your back, the nightcap sliding further askew on your head. The covers adjust around you as you move, and you settle again into stillness, breathing deeply, sleep reclaiming you immediately. The house at this hour is profoundly quiet. The servants are asleep in their attic rooms. Your husband, if he's home, is asleep in his own chamber. The street outside is silent except for the occasional clip-clop of a late hansom cab, carrying someone home from an evening engagement. The gaslights burn steadily in their iron posts, casting their yellow glow on empty pavements. Victorian London sleeps, or at least the respectable parts of it. There are other neighbourhoods where night is the busiest time, where gaslit streets are full of activity that respectable people don't acknowledge in daylight. But you know nothing of this. You're deep in your own private darkness, your consciousness completely suspended. The elaborate ritual of undressing that consumed the better part of an hour earlier this evening has faded from immediate memory, though your body still carries the evidence in the slowly fading marks on your skin. The freedom you felt when the corset finally came off, the relief when the boots were removed, the sensation of your hair falling loose, all of these have been absorbed into your physical memory, joining thousands of previous nights of similar experiences. Dreams come and go, though you won't remember most of them. Your sleeping mind works through anxieties and desires in symbolic form. Perhaps you dream of being unable to dress yourself, fumbling endlessly with buttons that won't fasten. Perhaps you dream of flying, your body light and unencumbered in a way it never is during waking hours. Perhaps you dream of social situations, a party where you arrive inappropriately dressed, a conversation where you can't make yourself understood. Victorian dream interpretation is a popular parlour game, with people trading theories about what various dream symbols mean, but most of it is nonsense. Dreams are simply your mind processing information, working through problems, consolidating memories. The nightcap that seemed so ridiculous when Mary first placed it on your head is serving its purpose now, keeping your pinned and braided hair relatively contained, absorbing the small amount of perspiration from your scalp, maintaining some warmth around your head in the cooling bedroom. Your grandmother would approve. She was always emphatic about the importance of nightcaps, claiming that sleeping with an uncovered head led to neuralgia, headaches, and general debility. Whether any of this is medically accurate is debatable, but the nightcap does keep your elaborately styled hair from becoming a complete disaster overnight, which is a practical benefit regardless of any theoretical health advantages. The blankets have shifted slightly with your movements, creating small pockets of cooler air that your sleeping body automatically adjusts to, pulling the covers more snugly around your shoulders without fully waking. This constant minor adjustment is part of the art of sleeping, maintaining warmth and comfort throughout the night, despite the falling temperature in the bedroom. The fire has long since died completely, leaving the room quite cold by morning standards, but you're cocooned in enough layers of wool and linen that you remain comfortable. Your breathing in deep sleep is different from your waking breathing, slower, more regular, each breath going deeper into your lungs without the corset restricting your rib cage. Your diaphragm can move through its full range of motion. Your lungs can fill completely. Your body can oxygenate itself properly. Historians still argue about whether Victorian women experienced chronic oxygen deprivation from constant corseting, whether their tendency toward fatigue and nerves was partly physiological rather than purely psychological. You've worn corsets for so many years that you have no basis for comparison. You don't know what it would feel like to spend entire days breathing freely, to never experience that slight breathlessness that comes from laughing too hard or climbing stairs too quickly while tightly laced. But at night, at least, your breathing is unrestricted. This might be why sleep feels so restorative, why waking in the morning after a good night's rest leaves you feeling genuinely refreshed. Your body has had hours to breathe properly, to circulate blood freely, to exist in its natural state without the constant pressure and restriction of fashionable clothing. The hours pass. 4 o'clock. 5 o'clock. Outside the window, the darkness begins its slow transition toward dawn. Though you're unaware of it behind the heavy curtains, the city starts waking before you do. Bakers firing their ovens, milk delivery carts beginning their rounds, factory workers trudging through cold streets toward another day of labour. The machinery of Victorian London starts up again, indifferent to whether individual citizens are ready or not. But in your bedroom, time seems suspended. You remain in deep sleep, your body taking advantage of every remaining moment of rest before Mary arrives to begin the morning ritual. There's no natural awakening for you, no gradual transition from sleep to wakefulness timed to the sunrise. Instead, you'll sleep until you're deliberately woken, until Mary knocks softly and enters with tea and warm water and the announcement that it's time to face another day. Your last hour of sleep is the deepest, your body making the most of the remaining time. Your muscles are fully relaxed, your breathing slow and even, your heartbeat steady and calm. The red marks from yesterday's corset have faded significantly, though they haven't disappeared entirely by the time you're dressed again. New marks will be forming in exactly the same places, a daily cycle that your skin has adapted to over years of repetition. The nightgown has twisted around your body during the night's movements, the fabric bunching slightly at your waist, the hem riding up above your ankles. The nighttime drawers are still in place, having stayed put better than the gown, though they too have shifted somewhat. You're not the neat, carefully composed figure that Mary tucked into bed last night. You're rumpled, dishevelled, your nightcap askew, your braid loosened at the end where the ribbon has come partially untied. This is the private reality of sleep, the human vulnerability that only your maid will witness, the version of yourself that no one else sees. And then, just as you're beginning the natural transition toward lighter sleep that precedes waking, you hear the sound that signals the end of night, a soft knock at your bedroom door, followed by the quiet click of the latch as Mary lets herself in. She's carrying a tray with tea and warm water, and she's come to begin the process of transforming you from this rumpled, sleeping creature back into a proper Victorian lady. But you're not quite awake yet. The knock and the opening door penetrate your consciousness but don't immediately pull you out of sleep. You're in that confused state between sleeping and waking, aware that something is happening but not yet alert enough to respond. Mary knows this, expects this. She's woken you hundreds of times before and knows exactly how to manage the transition. She sets the tray down quietly on the bedside table and moves to the window, pulling back the heavy curtains just enough to let in the grey morning light. Not too much, not too suddenly, that would be cruel. Just enough to begin coaxing your sleeping mind back toward consciousness. "Good morning, ma'am," she says softly, her voice pitched just loud enough to penetrate your sleep-fogged awareness. "It's 7:30. I've brought your tea." You make a small sound of acknowledgement, not quite words, just a noise that indicates you've heard her and are attempting to wake. Your eyelids feel heavy, glued shut with sleep. Opening them requires genuine effort, and when you finally manage it, the room seems too bright despite the filtered morning light. You blink slowly, trying to orient yourself, trying to remember where you are and what day it is and what obligations await you today. Mary is moving around the room with quiet efficiency, opening curtains a bit wider now that you're stirring, adjusting the window to let in fresh air. The Victorians are obsessed with morning ventilation, believing that stale night air must be expelled immediately upon waking. The cold draft makes you pull the covers more tightly around yourself, reluctant to leave the warmth of the bed. Your body is protesting the return to consciousness, wanting nothing more than to sink back into the depths of sleep you've just emerged from. But Mary is relentless in her gentle way. She returns to the bedside and helps you sit up, adjusting the pillows behind your back to support you. The movement requires you to wake more fully, to engage your muscles, to begin the transition from sleeping body to functional person. Your nightcap has indeed slipped almost completely off during the night, and Mary removes it with an amused expression, setting it aside. Your braid has loosened considerably, wisps of hair escaping around your face, and you can feel where the ribbon has come partially untied at the end. She hands you the cup of tea, hot, strong, slightly sweetened exactly the way you prefer it. The cup is fine bone china, part of your breakfast set, warm against your palms. You bring it to your lips and take the first sip, feeling the heat spread through your mouth and down your throat. This first tea of the morning is always the best, the one that begins the process of bringing your mind back online, making consciousness seem bearable instead of an unwelcome interruption of rest. While you sip your tea, Mary moves to your dressing room to begin preparing your clothes for the day. You can hear her opening wardrobe doors, considering options, selecting the appropriate dress for today's activities. She already knows your schedule better than you do at this moment. She keeps track of your social obligations, your at-home days, your morning calls, your charitable committee meetings. She'll choose accordingly, picking a morning dress for receiving visitors, or a walking dress if you're going out, or something simpler if you're staying home with no expected callers. The tea is working its magic, and you're becoming more alert with each sip. You look down at your nightgown, rumpled and twisted from the night's movements, and feel suddenly conscious of your dishevelled state. During the day you're always properly presented, always groomed and dressed and prepared for public viewing. But in these first minutes of morning, You're as close as you ever come to being completely natural, sleepy, rumpled, your face puffy from sleep, your hair in disarray, no corset shaping your body into fashionable lines. Mary returns with a basin of warm water and fresh towels. "Shall we begin, Ma'am?" she asks, and you nod, setting aside the half-finished cup of tea. There's no point in delaying the day is going to happen whether you're ready for it or not, and the sooner you begin the process of getting dressed, the sooner you'll be comfortable again in the peculiar Victorian sense of comfort that means being properly constrained and presented. You push back the covers and swing your legs out of bed, your feet finding your slippers automatically. The bedroom is indeed cold. The fire died hours ago, and despite Mary's slight opening of the window for ventilation, the room has chilled considerably. You stand up, and immediately your body reminds you that you slept for 8 hours in positions that didn't involve corset support. Your back aches slightly. Your muscles feel both relaxed and somehow uncertain, as if they've forgotten how to hold you upright without external reinforcement. Mary helps you remove the nightgown, pulling it up over your head, and suddenly you're standing in just your nighttime drawers, exposed to the cold morning air. Goosebumps rise immediately across your arms and torso, your nipples tightening in response to the temperature. Mary works quickly, dipping a cloth in the warm water and beginning your morning wash face first, then neck, then under your arms, then your torso. The warm cloth feels wonderful against your cold skin, and you close your eyes, submitting to her ministrations. She's checking the marks on your torso as she washes the red lines from yesterday's corset have faded significantly overnight but are still faintly visible. In another hour or two, they'll be completely gone, erased by the circulation of blood and the resilience of young skin. But then you'll put on today's corset, and new marks will form in exactly the same places. And tonight the cycle will repeat. Your skin has adapted to this daily trauma, thickening slightly in the places where pressure is most constant, developing a kind of tolerance that makes the marks fade faster than they did when you first started wearing adult corsets at 14. The washing is thorough but quick. This isn't a full bath, which would require hauling multiple buckets of hot water upstairs and would take the better part of an hour. This is just a freshening, removing the sweat and skin oils that accumulated during the night, making you feel cleaner and more awake. Mary washes your legs, carefully avoiding the areas where yesterday's garter marks are still faintly visible, then dries you briskly with a towel, rubbing hard enough to stimulate circulation and warm your skin. Now comes the process of rebuilding your daily architecture, layer by layer. First, the chemise is a fresh one, identical to the one you removed last night but clean and crisp from laundering. It slips over your head and falls to mid-thigh, the linen cool and slightly rough against your skin. Then the daytime drawers, longer than the nighttime version, and with the characteristic open crotch that makes using the chamber pot possible without complete undressing. Mary ties the waistband securely, and you have the first layer of your daily costume. But these 2 items alone make you feel nearly naked, exposed in a way that's uncomfortable despite the fact that you're technically covered from shoulders to knees. Victorian modesty is so ingrained that anything less than full dress feels improper, even in the privacy of your dressing room with only your maid present. You cross your arms over your chest instinctively, waiting for Mary to bring the next layer. She returns with your corset, the same one you wore yesterday, aired overnight and ready to be laced onto your body again. The sight of it produces a complex mixture of feelings, resignation at the discomfort you know is coming, but also a strange sense of rightness, as if the corset is an essential part of your identity that's been temporarily missing. Without it, you feel somehow incomplete, not quite yourself. Mary holds the corset open, and you step into it, positioning yourself so the busk aligns properly with the centre of your body. The whalebone stays are cool against your skin through the thin chemise, and you can feel them already beginning to impose their structure on your torso. Mary begins fastening the front busk, working from bottom to top, each post clicking into its corresponding eye with that familiar metallic sound. With each fastening, the corset closes a bit more around your ribcage, and you can feel your body beginning to compress. The busk fully fastened, Mary moves behind you and begins the lacing process. She starts at the bottom, pulling the laces through the grommets with firm, even pressure. You brace yourself against the dressing table, knowing what's coming. The laces tighten gradually, inexorably, pulling the back panels of the corset closer together, reducing your waist from its natural 26 inches toward the fashionable 21 that you maintain daily. "Breathe in, ma'am," Mary instructs, and you take a deep breath knowing it will be one of your last deep breaths for the next 14 hours and hold it while she pulls the laces tight. The corset cinches around your waist, compressing your soft flesh, pushing your internal organs upward and your ribs inward. The sensation is intensely uncomfortable for these first few moments, your body protesting this daily violation, your lungs unable to fully expand, your stomach suddenly cramped and confined. But you've done this thousands of times, and you know the discomfort will fade as your body adapts. In 10 minutes, you'll barely notice the restriction. In an hour, it'll feel almost normal. By afternoon, you'll have forgotten what it feels like to breathe freely. This is the Victorian woman's daily compromise, trading physical freedom for fashionable appearance. Accepting discomfort as the price of respectability, Mary continues lacing, working her way up your back, pulling each section tight before moving to the next. Your breathing has already adjusted to the shallow, upper chest pattern that corseting requires. Your posture has straightened automatically, the whalebone stays running up your back makes slouching impossible. You're being transformed from the soft, natural creature who woke up 15 minutes ago into the rigid, fashionable figure that Victorian society demands. The lacing reaches the top grommets, and Mary begins the final tightening, pulling with considerable force to bring the back panels as close together as possible. You grip the edge of the dressing table, bracing yourself, feeling your waist compress those final crucial inches. This is the moment that always makes you slightly dizzy, the moment when the corset reaches its full tightness, and your body has to accept that this is how you'll exist for the remainder of the day. Your vision swims briefly, little spots of light dancing at the edges, and then your equilibrium adjusts and the dizziness passes. Mary ties off the laces with her signature knot, tucking the ends neatly so they don't show through your outer clothing. You release your grip on the dressing table and stand upright, testing the corset's hold. It's secure, immovable, a second skeleton surrounding your natural one. Your waist has disappeared into the rigid cone of whalebone and cutil. Your ribs are compressed. Your stomach is flattened. Your breasts are lifted and separated by the corset's construction. You look down at yourself and see the fashionable silhouette beginning to emerge, no longer your natural body but the idealized form that Victorian beauty demands. The corset cover comes next, slipping over your head and covering the corset's hardware, providing a modest layer and protecting your dress from the metal grommets and busk. Then the first petticoat, tied at the waist with fabric tapes, its starched cotton standing away from your legs to create the foundational shape that your dress will drape over. Mary adjusts it carefully, making sure the hem hangs evenly all around. While she prepares the next petticoat, you catch sight of yourself in the mirror and pause, even in just chemise, drawers, corset cover, and one petticoat. You already look more like your public self than your private self. The corset has done its work, creating that distinctive Victorian shape, the tiny waist, the lifted bust, the rigid posture. This is who you are to the world, not the soft, sleepy woman who woke up 20 minutes ago, but this constructed, fashionable figure who meets Victorian expectations for feminine appearance. The second petticoat is added, then the bustle, that wire contraption that straps around your waist and projects backward, creating the shelf that your skirts will drape over. Mary buckles it securely, and you feel the familiar pressure against your lower back, the artificial weight that will force you to tilt your pelvis forward slightly to maintain balance. The bustle is one of the most ridiculous elements of Victorian fashion, purely decorative with no practical purpose whatsoever, but it's also non-negotiable. Without it, your silhouette would be all wrong. Your dress would hang limply instead of creating those fashionable curves. The third petticoat goes over the bustle, helping to smooth and shape the projection, creating gradual curves instead of an obvious artificial structure. Mary ties it securely and steps back to assess the foundation she's built. You're now wearing 6 layers: chemise, drawers, corset with its cover, and 3 petticoats, plus the bustle, and you haven't even put on your actual dress yet. The weight of all this fabric and structure is considerable, probably 8 or 10 pounds, and you can feel it pulling at your waist where everything is tied or fastened. But this is normal. This is what every morning looks like, what every fashionable woman goes through to achieve the proper appearance. You've been doing this since you were 14 years old, when you transition from girls' clothing to adult women's fashion, and by now it's so routine that you barely think about it. Your body knows what to expect, knows how to move within these constraints, knows how to breathe shallowly and sit carefully and navigate the world while carrying this much fabric and wearing this much structure. Mary brings your dress for the day. She's selected a morning dress in deep plum silk, appropriate for receiving visitors at home. It's one of your favourites, with elaborate trim at the cuffs and neckline, and a fashionable silhouette that shows off the work of the corset and bustle underneath. The dress is in 2 pieces, as most Victorian dresses are: a bodice and a skirt that attach separately at the waist. The skirt goes on first, wrapping around your petticoated waist and fastening with hooks at the side. It's heavy, lined with more fabric, the hem stiffened with horsehair braid to help it maintain its shape. Mary adjusts it carefully, making sure it drapes properly over the bustle, creating that fashionable backward sweep that's currently in style. The fabric pools slightly at your feet. The train is moderate, not one of those excessive sweeping trains that collect dirt and require constant management, but enough to look fashionable when you walk. The bodice comes next, and this is where the real work begins. The bodice has a complicated system of closures, hooks, and eyes down the back, all positioned where you cannot reach them yourself, all requiring Mary's patient fingers to fasten. She holds the bodice open while you slip your arms into the sleeves, and then she begins the process of closing it around your corseted torso. The bodice fits tightly, designed to mould to the shape the corset has created, with no excess fabric or looseness anywhere. It's cut to emphasize your compressed waist and lifted bust, creating a smooth, continuous line from shoulder to hip. Mary works her way down the back, fastening each hook into its corresponding eye, pulling the 2 sides of the bodice together until they meet perfectly along your spine. The bodice has boning of its own, additional stays sewn into the lining to maintain the rigid silhouette even over the corset. You're now encased in 2 layers of structural undergarments, and it shows your torso is completely inflexible, unable to bend or twist, held in perfect Victorian posture by the combined force of corset and bodice. The collar comes next, a separate piece of starched white linen that attaches to the bodice's neckline with collar studs. Mary fastens it at the back of your neck, and you feel the familiar pressure, the slight chafing that you know will worsen as the day progresses. Victorian fashion demands high necklines for daytime wear, and the collar is essential for achieving the proper, modest, covered appearance. Never mind that it's uncomfortable and restricts your ability to turn your head, it's fashionable. And that's what matters. Now comes the jewellery. Simple pieces appropriate for morning wear. A cameo brooch at your throat, fastened through the collar to hold it secure. Small pearl earrings in your pierced ears. A gold watch pinned to your bodice, hanging from a delicate chain. These are not decorative flourishes, but essential elements of proper dress. A lady is never fully dressed without appropriate jewellery, even for staying home and receiving morning visitors. Mary brings your boots, the same ones you wore yesterday, brushed clean and polished overnight. You sit on the dressing room chair while she kneels before you with a button hook, and the process begins again. 22 buttons on each boot, 44 total, each one requiring the hook to catch and pull through its corresponding buttonhole. Your feet, which spent the night free and comfortable, are being compressed back into the narrow confines of fashionable footwear. You can feel your toes protesting as they're squeezed together, your arches forced into an artificial curve by the boot's construction. The buttoning seems to take forever, though Mary works as quickly as she can. Click, pull, fasten, click, pull, fasten. The rhythm is hypnotic, and you find yourself mentally drifting, thinking about the day ahead. Morning callers to receive, correspondence to answer, perhaps a walk in the park if the weather is decent. The usual round of social obligations and domestic management that fills a Victorian lady's days. Nothing particularly exciting, but then your life isn't supposed to be exciting, it's supposed to be respectable, predictable, appropriate to your station. The boots are finally fastened. Both feet now properly imprisoned in leather. Mary helps you stand, and you test your balance. The heels aren't terribly high by modern standards, but they're high enough to change your posture, forcing you to stand more upright, to take smaller steps, to move with the careful deliberation that Victorian femininity requires. Combined with a corset and the bustle and the weight of your skirts, the boots complete the transformation from natural human movement to fashionable Victorian gliding. Now comes your hair, which is still in its loosened nighttime braid. Mary removes the ribbon completely and begins brushing out your hair, preparing it for its daily styling. The brushing is less leisurely than last night's ritual. This is functional brushing, working through tangles, preparing the hair to be manipulated into the fashionable coiffure you'll wear today. Your scalp is still slightly tender from yesterday's pinning, and occasionally the brush catches a sensitive spot that makes you wince. But the discomfort is temporary and expected, and soon your hair is smooth and ready to be arranged. Mary begins the architectural construction, sectioning and twisting and pinning, building the elaborate style that will frame your face and crown your head for the next 14 hours. Mary's fingers move through your hair with practiced certainty, dividing it into sections, twisting and coiling and pinning each piece into its designated position. She starts at the crown, gathering the top section and creating height with the strategic placement of a small hairpiece the rat you wore yesterday, cleaned and ready to provide volume again. She pins it securely to your scalp, and then begins wrapping your own hair around it, creating the illusion that all this height and fullness comes naturally from your own abundant tresses rather than from purchased padding. The process requires dozens of hairpins, those same U-shaped pieces of wire that Mary extracted so carefully last night are now being inserted with equal care, each one driven through hair and securing it to your head with a firm push. You can feel each pin as it slides home, a small pressure point on your scalp that will become part of the overall sensation of being pinned and held that defines your daily experience. Some women complain of terrible headaches from elaborate hairstyles, and you understand why you get them yourself occasionally, especially after long social events where your hair must maintain its shape for hours on end. But today's style is relatively moderate, appropriate for receiving morning callers rather than attending a ball. Mary creates smooth waves at your temples, pins them in place, then gathers the back hair into a twist that she secures with more pins. She adds a small switch of purchased hair to give the twist more fullness and length, working it seamlessly into your own hair so the join is invisible. The switch matches your colour perfectly. Mary ordered it specially from the hairdresser, bringing a clipping of your hair to ensure the dye lot would be identical. More pins, more twisting, more securing. Your scalp is beginning to feel tight, pulled in multiple directions by the various sections of hair being anchored firmly to your head. This tightness will remain all day, a constant low-level awareness that your hair is under tension, that dozens of metal pins are holding everything in place against gravity and movement. By evening, you'll be desperate to have it all taken down again, to feel those pins sliding out one by one, releasing the pressure. Mary tucks in a few strategic tendrils around your face, soft wisps that are meant to look like they've escaped naturally, though they're actually carefully placed and pinned to create the illusion of soft femininity within the rigid structure. Victorian hairstyles walk this strange line between severity and softness, between control and apparent casualness. Nothing is actually casual, of course. Every element is deliberate, planned, executed with precision. She steps back to assess her work, checking the symmetry, making small adjustments, adding one more pin here, smoothing a section there. Then she brings a hand mirror so you can see the back of your head, the elaborate construction that you'll carry around all day but never actually see yourself unless you deliberately check it in mirrors. You look at the reflection of the reflection, your hair swept up and back, height at the crown, smooth waves at the temples, everything precisely in place. You look exactly like a respectable Victorian lady should look. Exactly like every other respectable Victorian lady. The individuality is minimal. The conformity to fashion nearly absolute. Perfect Mary, you tell her, and she smiles with satisfaction. Setting aside the mirror and the remaining hairpins, your transformation is nearly complete. You stand before the full-length mirror and take in the total effect the plum silk dress with its elaborate trim, the corseted waist, the bustled silhouette, the boots, the jewellery, the hair. You look nothing like the rumpled, sleepy woman who woke an hour ago. You look like a fashion plate, like an illustration from Godey's lady's book, like exactly what you're supposed to be. But the process has taken its toll. You're already tired, and the day hasn't even begun. The corset is making your breathing shallow, the boots are pinching your toes, your scalp aches from the pins, the high collar is chafing your neck. You'll carry all this discomfort with you through every activity of the day, receiving callers, writing letters, taking tea, making your own social calls, supervising the household. And tonight, you'll reverse the entire process, the hour-long undressing ritual, the removal of all these layers, the release of all these constraints. Historians still argue whether Victorian women were conscious of the absurdity of this daily cycle, whether they questioned the necessity of so much structural undergarment and elaborate costume, or whether they simply accepted it as natural and inevitable. You suspect most women fall somewhere in between, aware that it's ridiculous but too deeply embedded in the system to imagine any real alternative. Reform dress exists. Advocates argue for rational clothing, but actually wearing simplified garments would mark you as eccentric, possibly immoral, certainly not respectable. The social consequences of dressing differently would be worse than the physical discomfort of dressing conventionally. Mary brings you downstairs to the morning room where breakfast awaits through eating, while corseted is always a delicate operation, requiring small bites and careful attention to not overeat and create uncomfortable pressure against the rigid stays. The morning stretches ahead with its predictable rhythms and obligations. You'll move through the hours encased in your layers, breathing shallowly, sitting carefully, maintaining the posture and appearance that Victorian society demands. And tonight, it'll all come off again. Mary will return to your dressing room as the sun sets, and she'll begin the reverse process: the unbuttoning, the unlacing, the unpinning. The 8 layers or 9, depending on how you count, will be removed one by one. Your hair will fall from its elaborate arrangement. Your waist will expand to its natural dimensions. Your feet will emerge from their leather prisons. Your skin will show the red marks of a day's compression. You'll wash, moisturize, slip into a fresh nightgown, and slide back into that warm bed. The cycle is endless, repetitive, exhausting. But it's also deeply familiar, comfortable in its predictability. This is your life, the rhythm of your days and nights, the pattern that defines your existence as a Victorian lady. The elaborate construction and careful deconstruction, the public presentation and private relief, the beautiful costume and the tired body beneath it. You take a small bite of toast, chewing carefully, aware of the corset's pressure against your stomach. Outside the window, London is fully awake now, carriages passing, servants running errands, the city alive with activity. And you're part of it, properly dressed and presented, ready to perform your role in the daily theatre of Victorian respectability. Mary hovers nearby, ready to assist if you need anything, to adjust your collar if it shifts, to bring more tea, to manage the endless small details that maintain your appearance throughout the day. She's as essential to your functioning as the corset itself without her skilled hands. You couldn't achieve or maintain any of this elaborate presentation. The relationship between lady and lady's maid is one of profound interdependence, though the power dynamics ensure that only one of you has real choices about how the relationship operates. The morning light streams through the window, illuminating the dust motes that dance in the air, catching on the silk of your dress and making it shimmer with subtle shifts of colour. You look down at yourself at the tiny waist, the elaborate trim, the fashionable silhouette, and feel a complex mixture of pride and exhaustion. This is what beauty looks like in your era. This is what respectability requires. This is the price of being a lady. And in 12 hours, you'll begin taking it all off again, counting down the minutes until you can finally breathe deeply, move freely, exist in your natural form. Until then, you'll carry this architecture on your body, these constraints within your flesh, this elaborate construction that transforms you from human animal into Victorian ideal. Do you remember the woman who stood in front of the mirror last night, watching Mary approach with that first button hook that feels like days ago now, though it was less than 12 hours? Time moves strangely when measured in corset lacings and boot buttonings, in the compression and release of flesh, in the daily putting on and taking off of identity itself. But for now, you're fully assembled, completely presented, ready to face whatever this day brings. The morning calls, the social obligations, the careful navigation of a world that demands so much from women's bodies in exchange for respectability and status. You take another sip of tea, feeling the liquid slide past the high collar, down your compressed torso, settling in a stomach that has nowhere to expand. This is Victorian womanhood, beautiful and uncomfortable, elaborate and exhausting, constraining and somehow essential. And tonight, when the sun sets and Mary returns to your dressing room with her button hooks and patient fingers, you'll surrender to the blessed relief of undressing once more. The cycle continues, day after day, night after night, A rhythm as reliable as breathing, though breathing itself is complicated when you're wearing 24 whalebone stays and 8 layers of silk. But that's hours away still. So many hours away. For now, you simply sit at the breakfast table, the morning light warming your face, the teacup cradled in your hands. Your breathing is shallow but steady. Your body has already adapted to today's corset, to today's boots, to today's elaborate architecture. You've done this thousands of times before, and you'll do it thousands of times again. This is simply what mornings look like, what days require, what nights promise to undo. The house around you hums with quiet activity, servants moving through their tasks, the distant clatter of dishes being washed in the kitchen, the soft tick of the clock on the mantelpiece counting out the minutes and hours. Time passes whether you're comfortable or not, whether you're corseted or free, whether you're awake or asleep. The world turns, the sun moves across the sky, and you move through your carefully constructed day within your carefully constructed clothing. And when evening finally comes, when the light begins to fade and the day's obligations are complete, you'll return to your dressing room once more. Mary will be waiting with her skilled hands and her button hooks and her patient attention to detail. She'll begin the undressing, that slow reversal of the morning's work, that gradual release of the day's constraints. Layer by layer, you'll emerge from your elaborate costume. Pin by pin, your hair will fall free. And finally, you'll slide between cool sheets and feel your body settle into its natural shape once more. The promise of that release sustains you now, as you sit at breakfast in your plum silk and your corset and your pinned hair. The knowledge that every tight lacing will be loosened, every button will be unfastened, every pin will be removed. The certainty that night always follows day, that rest always follows labour, that the body, no matter how constrained, always finds its way back to freedom. For now, though, you simply breathe shallowly, carefully, within the limits of whalebone and silk, and you wait.